This just in. Breaking news. Plunderstorm Creator Royale returns January 25th. Growl invited? Only playing Plunderstorm because the Creator Royale? I guess we're going to find out. Growl, how have you been?
You know, I was a little bit worried. I booted up Plunderstorm for the first time yesterday, trying to de-rust a little bit. And I stomped kids. Literally first game dub. Just like 8 kills, killed everybody. I still got it, baby.
Did you guys see the drama around like the Plunderstorm just game mode in general, not just the Creator Royale, but people were very, very upset about the Plunderstore not having the correct amount of, in their mind, the correct amount of longevity in terms of how much content it should provide.
Drama? Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, like, I don't know, as WoW players, we're just so, what's the word, like, objective driven, I guess. And so, like, Plunderstorm comes out and, like, no matter how fun it is or, like, anything, we're just like, so what do we get? What do I do? What do I have to grind? What's the end game? How much do I have to play? And, like, people can't just, like, sit down and just enjoy it, I guess. But at the same time, like, I'm guilty too, right? Like, I literally mentioned it last week before I knew about the tournament, or maybe I knew. Mm-hmm. And I was basically like, oh, well, if they don't do another Creator Royale tourney, there's going to be a lot less hype around it. So, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm the same. We're all just WoW players in the end.
Dude, I mean, look at this Rookie video. Is it Plunderstorm back, but there's a problem, and then the fucking thumbnail just goes, no reason to play.
I mean, I think people, I've been out the entire week. I haven't played Plunderstorm at all. Were there actually any changes? I'm pretty sure the answer is no.
There's new abilities. Some of them are kind of cool. There was like a Celestial Barrage.
Barrage, I've heard is really good.
That one's really good. That one's kind of cool.
Yeah, so basically, I think the problem is that Plunderstorm has been gone for a year, right? Or something close to a year. And so I feel like it doesn't feel like it's a year's worth of changes, Like, I think if it was, this was a patch in Plunderstorm, or like, it came back in a month or something like that, people are like, oh, this is cool. So, like, some of the things they did, they rebalanced the map a little bit. They've added some camps. They've tried to, like, make the map a little bit better in some of the eastern parts. They added some, like, creep respawning to kind of be, like, give value in holding some of the middle areas, like the farms and stuff. They added a few new abilities, like, I don't know, maybe like 10% or something, but nothing special. They added these, like, horses. They're like little mounts that you can, like, ride around temporarily. So, like, it's an update, right? But it, for it being gone for a whole year, it felt like it was a little bit underwhelming.
It feels very samey, is what I would say about the entire thing.
I was just about to say, it reminds me, based on the description, that this is Season 4, Part 2.
Season 4 of Plunderstorm.
No, because, like, you think about it, Season 4 the first time was actually pretty successful. Then they did Season 4 again, and it was horrible. Now it's Plunderstorm Part 1, wildly successful. Plunderstorm Part 2 with no, like, minimal changes. I
think it's still fun. Like, I've still been enjoying playing. It's more just like, again, I think that Growl is spot on with it, where he's saying it just doesn't feel like it's a year's worth of changes, and it doesn't. At least for me, like, I'm having fun playing, but I don't think it captures that same level of feeling that I had the first, time around whenever I was playing Plunderstorm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's, unfortunately, just, like, again, it's just a small kind of mini game, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't think it's meant to, it's not meant to be this thing that, oh, Plunderstorm is out. This will certainly keep me busy for the whole next month, all the way. This is, sorry, hiccup. This is basically just like a little small thing, play for a few, hours or whatever. And it's like, that's sort of, I think, in line with that rewards thing, like you mentioned. Like, you kind of were like, oh, you get the rewards so fast. And it's like, yeah, because they kind of, they didn't expect you to play that many hours this time, It's just kind of there, like, rehashing some old stuff. So, I don't know. It's hard to be a hater because it's just kind of like freebie, whatever content. It does kind of suck when it's like, on the roadmap and announced and everybody knows it's coming, and then it's just a little underwhelming. But I don't know. I mean, I'm still enjoying it. It's still there. There's not a lot of reason to hate on it, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to hate on it. It took me probably, I want to say, about 3 hours in total, maybe 4 hours to actually get all of the loot from the Plunderstore. It's also one of those things that if you did Plunderstorm the first time around, you can't buy, like, the trader tenders again, which is a little bit weird, but
you can get all the other rewards, right?
You can get all the other rewards. I think there were some that returned that you already had, but yeah, you can get all the other rewards.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't seen it yet, there's basically like it looks a lot like the in-game shop, like the cash shop, except for it's all plundered things or whatever.
Yeah.
And this time it's all separated by like, because last time it was just a renown track that you just work through and you unlock things, and now it's like you get plunder, you get this currency, and then you can sort of just like buy whatever you want in the thing. But when I was playing, I like half of the shop was already unlocked for me, right? And I assume that's all the stuff that is returned from the last plunder.
Exactly. You got the same stuff from the Renown from last time, so it just returned again.
All that FOMO, everyone freaking out about the Plunderstorm items, and then here they are back again already. Who would have thought?
And then now they're saying there's not much to do. There's nothing to do. Like
well, I think the people who were complaining about there's not much to do were the people who had fun playing Plunderstorm last time, right?
Yeah, or the people that want it to be vibrant too, like the people who want the community to be big and want lots of people playing and lots of people streaming and like want it to feel like it was before.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's just not for them, like, it's sort of like the whole like MMO tribalism thing of like, you always want everybody to play your game, right? You always want to boot up Twitch. Like that's why Classic has been so crazy the last, month, is because you boot up Twitch and like literally 90% of the people in the WoW category are just streaming Classic, and it's like it makes your game feel alive. And I feel like because there's some, right? Like I know Peekaboo's been playing. I think Zaryu's going to start again soon. So there's definitely some, like a lot of the PvPer crowd has been playing, but it's a lot less hype than it was before.
I think, I mean, it's like the same people who are complaining about there not being enough like content in Plunderstorm are like the same people kind of like Speed, where he's like, I think Plunderstorm will fail without a leaderboard, need some dopamine so people can chase. And it's like, I think that those people are also the people who are willing to be like, yeah, we actually got the rewards too quickly. Now there's nothing else for me to do here.
I wouldn't have hated a leaderboard. I wouldn't have hated like even just like a little something, just like a record of like who has the most plunder, like who has the most wins or the most kills, like nothing like some
you don't want an
crazy
MMR
elo
system or something. Yeah,
I mean, I just think the game isn't quite mature enough to have something like that, and I feel like it might cause the games to be less fun. Like part of what makes Plunderstorm fun is everyone's just kind of like battling. So like from experience playing the tournament last time around, the games in the tournament were so absolutely wildly different from the games on the ladder, because in the tournament was like the first time there's stakes, right? It's like, okay, there's $50,000 distributed, across the prizes, and it's like people actually tried so hard to stay alive, and it's like the amount of fighting and the amount of experience and like things that happen around the map was so much smaller, even with a lot of creators that weren't taking it super seriously. And so I think when you introduce a matchmaking system, my opinion, I've always been very anti matchmaking in games that are battle royale, because I feel like part of the fun is like the wildly wrongly like distributed lobbies and like being able to go on a rampage and get 20 kills and like I just think like that. I don't know. I just think that battle royales are not meant to be competitive. I know people who are like really serious about that sort of game might not agree with me there, but that's just sort of how I've always felt. I don't really think introducing a matchmaking rating to a battle royale makes it better. I think it makes it worse, because people just like play a lot. Like what makes those games fun is when people are aggressive and they move around and you run around the map, as opposed to like feeling like you need to be scared and like hiding and stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, like what we've noticed from a lot of just WoW in general, or even games in general, is people are so rewards driven, and I definitely think like there's just a lack of goals, and I don't know if that's a problem, but I feel like there's definitely just a lack of goals in Plunderstorm compared to the last time or other activities. So I think that's all it is.
Yeah,
I think it's fine personally.
Yeah, I did think it was kind of interesting that, at least for the Creator Royale, it was more WoW affiliated people this time, because I felt like last time they were really like kind of broadening out who they actually invited to the Creator Royale, but now it feels like it's a lot more just like World of Warcraft people.
Very limited who they got into. I think I don't even know if I would have got in. I think Dorky helped me get in, but there's a lot of people that did not get invited. It was very hard. Maybe it would have been cool if there's like a couple tournaments or something, or like maybe an open. I don't know how they could have done it, but
I mean they got classic people as well. They got Grubby and Ompy on a team. You see that?
Grubby and Ompy, that team goes hard.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be more fun if there was a way to do custom lobbies with like friends or guildmates or stuff like that?
I think it's hard to set up something like that. I it's a BR. I don't know.
I mean, let's say you did have, do you want to do a 20-person thing like with your guild? Do you think it'd be like add anything to the game?
That's an interesting idea. Like, imagine if they cut off the map a little bit to make it a little bit smaller, and then made a smaller lobby. Like, I think getting 20 to 30 people in a guild, or like whatever the max is, a little bit much. But like, imagine if you had like a 10 to 15 person map. I feel like that would actually be pretty cool. The problem is like, I think they just don't have the infrastructure to do it, and they're like, I don't think enough people would do it. You know what I mean? Like, it would be super cool if for the people that did like, oh, hey, we have a guild, like we have 10 people, let's go try it or whatever. I don't know, maybe like if there was an ability to like have a guild in-house, and then also give like a little achievement or like silly thing to kind of like push people in to try it, to do it once or whatever, and then maybe it might take off. I think it's a cool idea, but I also think based off of how little they added or changed, I feel like this isn't really, I don't know, maybe they come back next time with Plunderstorm and be like, here's all this crazy shit, but to me, Plunderstorm doesn't feel like something that they're looking to like put a lot of effort in and maintain heavily.
Yeah, it's kind of how it feels to me too. I think it would be cool, but it's more just like, even creating something like that, it feels like maybe the developmental time would have been better spent elsewhere. Not that it would necessarily be a bad thing, but then you just kind of questions like, could you be cooking up something that's maybe a little bit cooler?
Yeah, I guess with all the patches that have come out so far this expansion that like are half baked or like buggy or whatever, it's hard to ask for more Plunderstorm development. I know it's not apples to apples there, but I think they've been more misses than hits, I think, lately with patches, and I think that asking for stuff like Plunderstorm or whatever might be a bit much.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, there's so many different teams that are working on different versions of World of Warcraft now, because we have like SOD, you have hardcore, you have like classic, you have Kata, you also have retail. What else do you have? Is that it?
It's a lot. I mean,
hardcore is part of classic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's classic, and
but there's
like
era, then there's
vanilla,
hardcore, right?
Hardcore, yeah. And
there's SOD, and then
PvP and PvE and RP and SOD, and it's like, you ever get those guys that come in your chat that are like, hey, like World of Warcraft looks cool, what version should I play? And you're just like, oh my god, I don't even know where to start. Like,
dude, I get the people
maybe
sometimes,
it's not good for onboarding.
I get the people sometimes who've been like, yeah, I've only ever played classic, and I'm just like, oh, holy shit, wait a second, you've only played classic and you're jumping into retail? I'm just like, what? Wait a second.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that happens a lot too with like, so I've been obviously gaming classic a lot with some like bigger streamers, and something I get all the time is like, oh, you should get so and so into retail, or like, you ask this person to play retail, do M+ with this person. It's like, it's a completely different game. Like, I genuinely think that they wouldn't even enjoy it. Like, not to say that retail isn't fun, but like what they're enjoying out of classic is not the same thing as what you enjoy out of retail. I think it's just like it's just so different.
Yeah. Classic, you make it almost like what you want it to make it. It's a very open-ended RP type thing. It's about the journey. Like, it's almost like playing a D&D campaign or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So
HC is interesting, because I feel like HC, I've seen, not even just from like stream-wise, but like the people who are actively on the game are very clearly new to World of Warcraft and like the ecosystem itself, right? They're asking questions about like add-ons and like, how long is maintenance supposed to be, or how long is maintenance normally? And I'm just like, wait a second, hold on.
Oh yeah, I was doing a dungeon run a couple nights ago, and I was playing with a guy who was like, we had like a couple streamers and a couple non-streamers, and they're all hyped to like get in the call with us or whatever, like the other guys. And they're like, one of the guys is like, yeah, I just started playing WoW in December, like, a month ago. He's like, I've never played WoW before. This is my first iteration of WoW, is hardcore classic. And it's just like, dang, like, that's cool. As much as I'd like to see these people get into retail and try retail as well, it's like, it's very cool to see something like bringing new people into WoW, because I think that's one of the things WoW has always struggled with, is just, a lot of the community is just people that have been around for a long time.
Whenever funnily enough, whenever Classic launched, that actually brought a lot of people after Classic, brought them into like retail for the very beginning of Shadowlands as well. Because that actually started like a new wave of people who were playing World of Warcraft, because Classic was just so big on launch.
Shadowlands is pretty funny. I saw you attempted, or the start of your video SAR.
Oh, shit.
Your most recent video with the Shadowlands thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the pitfalls of Shadowlands came about that actually of like them trying to combine classic and retail, and them like trying to introduce things from classic back into the game that like, they're good in classic and they can be good in other games, but they go, head to head with some of the things that retail wants.
I think they just got.
Yeah.
I think they got so lost with like the meaningful choice stuff that they
Yeah.
kept parroting over and over again, where they're like, they want your character to feel permanent, and you're just like, holy shit, that's not
And
retail.
everyone's just like, no.
Dude, it was like, dude, that's not retail. Then it sucked, and everyone was like, well, now what? All right. On the docket for today, we got a raid Renown. There was some stuff with like raid testing, and there's like a new mount that we're going to talk about as well. We're also going to talk about the new dungeons that we've seen on the PTR. But raid Renown, probably, honestly, some of the most interesting stuff that we've seen out of this week comes with the raid Renown track. We kind of talked about it a few weeks ago, very briefly talking about how you were going to get basically a dinar for completing the raid Renown track. And now Blizzard has completed a blue post that discusses basically the cadence of how you're going to be getting these things, what the Renown track is going to contain, and just basically everything you need to know about the Renown track. What are the big points that we should hit on here, Squishy? What do you think?
I think the first thing I want to mention is I want to credit Blizzard and Skarzard for doing this, because this is a massive
Is this
post.
Skarzard?
Like, I believe so.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
He cooked.
Yeah. Usually Skarzard's the one that makes like the big, he's in charge of rewards, so he is the one that makes this big blog post going over everything, which I think is awesome, because this is what players want to know. Like, he goes through how much renown you get from the raid, like, and goes through the rewards, what they mean, like, oh, there's catch up, like the things that players want to hear about the season, and like how this works. I think he goes through it, which is awesome. So I think kind of as a quick summary, there is a new raid-only Renown track. You don't need to grind reputation outside of the raid and do your dailies. But this is very similar to the Severed Strands buff right now, where you do stuff in the raid, and you rank up a max of 1 Renown per week. There is a catch-up. There's a total of 2 Renown levels in the raid naturally. Right now, like, if things were default right now with Severed Strands, you would need to kill all 8 bosses every week to get the allotted things, which makes it really rough when you're extending on a boss.
Okay.
But with this system, it's going to be a lot easier. You need to do half of the available activities in the raid, whether that be killing bosses, killing lieutenants on trash, or I don't remember.
Killing lieutenants on trash. Oh no.
Yeah, so basically they're just giving it to you at this point. Like, if you just,
pretty much.
It's
you just
difficulty
clear the raid and you get it.
This point right here, it's difficulty agnostic is actually a pretty big deal. That means that you can actually go in LFR or like normal mode as well. Say you're like a heroic raiding guild, or you're a mythic raiding guild and you're extending for whatever reason, or you're just not killing that many bosses. You can go in on like a difficulty that's easier for you and actually be able to get the renown tracks.
Yeah, and it shouldn't take long. You would only need the further bosses provide more. Like the final boss gives 1,000 rep. The penultimate boss provides 600. The rest provide 450. So like, the last 4 bosses probably get you enough. I think exactly. So that will be really quick to get. They haven't discussed exactly how the catch up works, but it will exist in case you fall behind, because everybody doesn't want to fall behind. As for the rewards, I think there is a quite an interesting thing. So, at Renown 7 is the raid skip, Renown 8.
There's a raid skip attached to it. Oh, that is crazy.
Yeah, so there is some concern. So, with the current raid skip, you kill usually the penultimate boss 3 times on the difficulty, and you get that difficulty's raid skip. There's definitely some concern that people are going to, once they hit Renown 8, just skip to the final bosses and just skip the midsection. We don't know if that's actually going to be like a
There's
thing.
no way. There's no way that the raid skip is difficulty agnostic.
I mean, all it says here is just like raid skip unlocked at Renown 8. After defeating the first boss, an NPC will fly in with a rocket that you could use to skip between bosses 7 and 8. As raid skips were previously via quest and also for difficulty, placing this on the Renown track is one of the many things we're trying out. That line makes it seem like the per difficulty thing is gone. Meaning the second that this is week 6 of the patch or 7 of the patch, you can immediately skip to the 7th boss.
Is that a problem?
Interesting.
Is that a problem? I guess it's a little bit weird for Mythic. It's weird for Mythic progression guilds who, you know, probably not Hall of Fame, but you're, say, World 300, World 400, something like that. It's kind of weird for a guild like that, right? Those are the guilds that I think would be the most affected by something like this. Yes.
Yes. Now, I mean, Growl, before I say kind of my thoughts, what do you? How do you feel about that?
It feels weird. Like, my first instinct is that it feels weird, but at the same time, like, I don't really see things being that problematic. Like, at the end of the day, if you want to skip mid-boss, like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, right? Like, let's say you have a guild that, like, really, really struggles, right? To the point where, like, skipping the middle bosses is going to save you a lot of time. I mean, the end bosses are just going to be misery. Like, I feel like it might... The only thing I would worry about is that it creates some sort of a gameplay loop that isn't fun for people, but they feel obligated to. You know, like, let's say you're a guild that, you know, you start the tier, you have some roster issues, you're struggling. You know, you're talking about rank 3 or 400, but I'm kind of thinking like the bottom of cutting edge, like the cutoff or whatever. Imagine you're that kind of guild, and then like all of a sudden the skip opens, assuming that it works like that, and you can just decide to skip a boss or two and just go to the 7th boss. I feel like that just isn't like, there's a difficulty curve for a reason, and so it doesn't really make sense to me to just like skip like that. I don't know. I mean,
that's what I kind of realized, because I think like for me a big thing, like even this tier, a bunch of guilds tried to buy the Insurrect lockout to hit Hall of Fame and skip Silken Court. They were largely unsuccessful.
Well, yeah, that's ridiculous.
That was a hard boss, yeah.
And like, I have a feeling that this will be a similar thing where if you're intentionally skipping like the middle bosses, you are setting yourselves behind a lot on loot because you're not farming those bosses. Probably some of them are at least going to be semi-easy. And also, you are just not skilled enough to be on that those final bosses without, you know, the buff scaling up essentially.
So this says between bosses 7 and 8. So this is an 8 boss tier, right?
Yes.
So this is basically saying the guild, the hypothetical guild here was progging, you know, let's say Brew Twister Ovanax. They kill Brew Twister Ovanax, you know, they get Renown 8. This is week 9 of the patch or whatever. They get Renown 8, and then they're like, you know what? I don't want to do the rest of the raid. Let's go straight to Answer. Can start pulling that boss. You're just like,
yeah, theoretically.
I mean,
I just don't see it being problematic, right? Like, I think it's gonna be very not fun gameplay, but I mean, it doesn't really hurt, like, you know, integrity or anything, right?
I don't think it'll
it
do
feels
anything
wrong,
unless,
but I don't think it matters, right?
Unless the final boss is Xavius level of easy. That is the only exception. Is if the final boss is a joke, then there's a problem. But if they get the curve at least in, even if there's, you know, we've talked about the massive spike between, you know, in Emir Jasol and also this tier. As long as the difficulty curve goes upwards, no matter how steep it is, I don't think this is a problem.
Yeah, I don't really see this as necessarily a problem too, because of when you actually get this skip applied to your entire raid. It is a little bit weird, I think, specifically for Mythic in terms of how it's applied, because I think that most people would tend to agree that how the skip was applied to like Mythic guilds before was like largely okay. But I think that in general, like
I still stand by that. I don't think it's gonna work. Like
I don't. That. I think it will, but I don't know if it should.
You think week 9 of the patch, if you've been farming Heroic, you'll be able to walk in on Mythic and then be able to skip to the last boss?
Yes.
That is how it reads, yes.
I think it will work like that, and I think if you do that, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
I mean, dude,
that is the intent.
This is intentional here. It says, as raid skips were previously a quest... or were obtained via quest and also per difficulty. Placing this on the Renown tracks is one of the many things we're trying out, meaning that they're replacing it via quest and per difficulty. This means that there's no longer a per difficulty base here.
Yeah.
I did hate the way that the other raid skips worked. I hate that there was like random quests and there's quests.
It was annoying. Yeah.
And they're in my log and there's these items. So I definitely liked that. I like them rethinking it, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. We'll see.
I like the Shredded Strands buffs being attached to the Renown track. I actually think that Shredded Strands worked out pretty well.
I think it did as well.
It felt a little bit weird how it was applied, and I think that this actually makes it feel more like a cohesive system where you're, Renown 7, damage and healing buff improves to 6%. That's actually a big deal. Like, I mean,
I think one of the biggest things is it's going to start earlier. Because if you remember Severed Strands, it started week 8 of the patch or something, or like of the season or something weird. Like, it was delayed significantly. As far as we know, this is going to start week 1.
Yeah, well...
Meaning the first buff is going to be on week 3.
3, yeah. You get 3% damage and healing increase while inside of Liberation of Undermine.
On week 3, which is a lot quicker start. Which I think is good in a way.
What does this mean? An object in the hotel which has a chance to grant an augment rune.
So inside the hotel, there is basically it's a slot machine. It's called the augment rune dispenser or something like that. It's like right when you enter.
Yeah.
And you basically can get free augment runes from it.
This goes hard. I'm in. I'm all in.
But it improves later. So like, there's just some good quality of life. Like consume food 100% faster. Like having the entire race sit down and get a feast for 10 seconds is now just 5 seconds. Like there's nothing.
Jeez.
I love quality of life. Like getting more augment runes.
They gotta watch out for this one. You can keep the sated remove debuff window open.
Yeah,
and remove sated in combat. They gotta watch out for this one. This one's a little bit weird.
I mean, assumingly those will be outside the arena, but
well, you can
it
keep
says play sparsely in the outdoor areas. Like
you can keep the window open is the problem, where you can like pre-lust and then like reset your sated. There's like weird.
Well, like I'm sure if it's a thing, like they will keep that out of raid. They will, but. Again, quality of life. Like the things that raiders have been doing that is just kind of like to save time, like lusting on trash, then resetting the boss when you get to the actual boss is just weird. And this hopefully makes it better. Right? Like, there's also another quality of life thing, which is, where is it? I don't know where it was.
You were granted one counterfeit dealer's chip, which can be traded at the hotel for cosmetic appearances. Like the Dragonflight Season 4 vendors, one of these will be available to provide multiple colors of weapons from the Undermine. That's
just transmog.
Yeah, that's sick.
Oh, there it is. Renown 6. So Renown 6, access to a self battle res while out of combat. Basically, that is recovery.
Oh wow!
Again. This is another weird thing that guilds do, where you have to soulstone every wipe to save time.
As warlocks are in shambles.
This is quality of life. Like that way, warlocks are less required. These are all good things, and like I hope they continue because if your warlock forgets to soulstone, you're either blowing an onk or you're wasting like 5 to 10 minutes of raid running back. I think. Like, these are such good changes.
This is a wild one. A goblin inside the raid will provide you a hot sauce, a fire-breathing damage proc that scales in effectiveness based on your raid consumables. Like, what are we... Dude, some of this stuff here is crazy. Oh, yeah. Now, then the augment rune dispenser is better. And then, at some point, we get to Dinars. And Dinars return at Renown 17 and Renown 19?
Which is week 16 of a patch, which I know there's been a lot of... We've talked about this before, and there's been a lot of criticism over week 16. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, okay, real quick, I want to go back a little bit because I kind of want to talk about something, like thinking about this.
Okay.
So during like COVID, mid Shadowlands, like everybody quitting for Final Fantasy, there was a really big talk with a lot of the like artificial slowdowns and like, I don't want to use the word time gating, but just like annoyances in a way, like in the raid. In a lot of other games, like, so for example, like Lost Ark was released around that time, and then Final Fantasy. A lot of those games, like, you know, you wipe to, like, let's say there's a boss that takes 500 wipes or whatever, like, and plenty of these Mythic bosses do. But you wipe to the boss, and then immediately you're just bam, right there in front of the boss. There's no consumes, there's no soulstone, there's no rezzing, there's no clearing trash, there's no running, there's no anything, right? Like, you're just bam, you're just right there. And I feel like that was one of the big criticisms that WoW got, and I think they were holding their ground on that a lot, like saying that was a very important part, and it kind of died down in a way. Like you haven't really heard that many people talking about that, and this to me feels like an area where they're going to have a really hard time going back. Like thinking about a lot of these changes, right? For example, giving away free augment runes, having all these things like repairs and stuff in the raid, increased movement speed, being able to self recovery, like all the stuff in the raid. I feel like half food or half food buff time or whatever. This is not stuff that I think is gonna go away. Like I feel like if they introduce all these quality of life things and then the next raid all this stuff is gone and now it's back to old shitty slower WoW rating. So to me this seems like they're going in a very deliberate direction with this, and I like very much expect this to stay. And like I don't know, how do you see this just before we move on? How do you see this staying, right? So like let's say this is something that they do going forward in every raid. Like do you think they're going to have a renown track for every raid, or do you think they're just going to like add all these features in from day one? Like is there even a point? Like why is this? So the only thing I worry about that seems a little weird to me is like why. To me, the most important parts of a patch are the first month and the first 2 months. Like that's when a majority of the people, especially the more casual people, are playing. So like to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to like hold back a lot of these quality of life changes to, you only get them after raiding for 3 months or whatever. So it's silly to say like I want them now, but to me it doesn't make sense to time gate all this stuff.
Most of the QOL stuff is actually pretty early on. The self-res is week 5 of the patch, which, I would say that's relatively early on. The self-res is week 4 of the patch. You get the raid specific Hearthstone, that's week 3 of the patch. A lot of these actually are kind of early. Again, now it's not all of them, right? The guarantee on the augment rune is week 14. The dinar is week 16. But those are Blizzard at least views these as more for people who are going to be playing the game long term. And now we can talk about the cadence a little bit in a second, but I do think that you actually get a lot of the QOL immediately. And just talking about the things that we are getting quality of life wise, I actually think that these are great things to continue to have for future patches. And I think that you're absolutely spot on whenever you say these are things that are kind of difficult to take the cat out of the bag type of deal. Like once you start introducing these things, you kind of have to do it on like every tier. And I think it's totally fine to just continue to bring these back. And I mean, you have consume food faster. That's a nice QOL. You have a raid specific Hearthstone. That's a nice QOL as well. An ability to remove sated debuffs that allows you to lust on trash more frequently. That's a nice thing to continue to have. Self-resurrection while out of combat. Again, that's a fantastic thing. And these are just good quality of life, I think, to attach to a renown track where it's not something that I think is like, these are never mandatory things. These are never mandatory style effects, but they're nice quality of life. And I think that's the thing that they're hitting on, and I think doing a good job of hitting on.
I think the way that I see this is their testing ground. I think they are testing these things, and whatever, because like Growl said, I completely agree that these things are not easy to take back.
Agreed.
And so anyone that people feel like this is good, this needs to stay. I think Blizzard has shown time and time again, if things are good, they will keep them. We've got a lot of quality of life changes over the last couple of years because of that, dragon riding, etc., etc. So Dinar is finally kind of sticking around a little.
It's crazy that they brought this back after saying that they're not bringing it back like 100 times.
So like overall, I think this is just good for the game because it lets Blizzard test the waters. And if the thing sucks, like let's say for some reason, the self-res is causing issues. I don't know why, but it might be. They can just be like, yeah, that was just a one-time as part of a renown track, and we can remove it after the next raid tier. But if it's good, they'll be like, yeah, we tested that. We're going to toss it into the next, like, as a permanent feature going forwards. That's what they do with tier sets. The really good tier sets get turned into talents.
Well, okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here.
Right?
I'm gonna get flamed in the comments, but I mean the voice has to be said. There's no world where they improve quality of life and rating and it's received poorly, right? Like unless it's literally buggy and dumb, like, you know, there's no way that people are going to be like, yeah, I really like the 10-second food buff. You know, I really like having to walk back from the graveyard. The problem is that it's not just about each individual thing, it's about crafting the overall experience. And while I don't necessarily agree, you know, their argument would be that, you know, the raid should feel a certain way and it should feel like a special event and like, you know, things happen that have consequences. And it's sort of, for a lot of people who enjoy like classic or like older school, you know, they would say that a lot of these things that Blizzard has introduced over the years has ruined not the integrity, but just like the feel of raids and putting all the pressure in raids into be like, you know, very, very difficult encounters instead of like, you know, being more about the experience, turned off a lot of people from this game. Now, I'm not saying it's good or bad, right or wrong, but that would be the argument, right? And unfortunately, there's not going to be a world. I mean, the funniest example that I heard of is it was a GDC conference. They were talking about Diablo 3, and basically they did a weekend event where, okay, Diablo 3, all the item drops are massively increased. It's like 50% or 100% increased drops, right? And so they do that, and then, well, of course, what is the feedback from the player base, right? That was great. This is the greatest, most fun event ever. But
Of
like,
course.
doubling the drop rate of everything doesn't necessarily make the game better or healthier in the long term. And now, when the drop rate goes down, everyone's like, this fucking sucks. Like, why? You know, I should have played last weekend. Why am I even doing this? And I feel like they do have to be careful. Personally, I think they're on the right track with this. So again, I don't want to say that they're going in the wrong direction here, but you know, to say that like, oh, they'll evaluate how this goes, like I think it's almost too late. Like I would say it's almost too late for them to go back, and that's and that's sort of what my point with the original question of like, you know, how does this get introduced as a long-term system? Because I already see it. To me, it's like they've already added. They're already looking at how do we erode away a lot of the conflict and raids in the game, which is great for me and a great change. To me, the biggest problem right now that stands is the Mythic lockouts, not being able to pug bosses easier and like not feeling like you're making a commitment when you're playing with people. To me, that's the most important direction they need to go, but a lot of these things are good as well.
It's kind of interesting that you mentioned the Mythic raid lockout. I was actually having this discussion with some people the other day. I felt like the Mythic raid lockout, while people cite that as like a really big issue, I feel like the amount of people that it would actually end up positively impacting is actually kind of small. Like removing the Mythic raid lockout. I do think that the people that it would positively impact, it's like so it should go. Like I tend to agree that it should go. Like there's no reason to actually have it. But I think that the amount of people that it actually positively affects is actually kind of narrow.
That the raid lockout does positively, or that removing it would positively?
That removing it would positively affect. It's just like not that many people get bit by the raid lockout, the Mythic raid lockout.
I think it removes opportunity. So for example, like I played a lot of Mythic Plus when I first started. I didn't necessarily have a guild right away, and I wasn't always in on my Mythic Plus main. But to me, even if I could, like, even if I was reasonably, like, I wasn't a streamer at the time, but I was like, you know, high rated enough where I could like get accepted into groups or whatever. But if I join a guild or if I join a pug and we kill one boss, like there's so many raids where the first boss is turbo mega easy, and then at that point I'm locked. Like it's a big commitment and a big change, and like I feel like if it was less of a commitment, like I think we would see more of that though. Like I think the reason that you say that there's not, because not a lot of people are like, you know, pugging random bosses and stuff. But I think as soon as you remove those lockouts, I think we will see more people just being like, you know, fuck it, let's just ram our head into the second boss and see what happens. Because like if you're somebody who doesn't have a guild because of scheduling or whatever reason, like who knows, maybe that's your only out. Like maybe that's the only thing you can do, and maybe that might actually get more people into raid, like getting gear and stuff. I mean, again, we're on the same side here. Like we don't think raid lockouts are good.
Oh yeah, exactly. I would remove it because I don't think it's good.
I think overall for me, like, I think the Mythic lockout, I know what they've said multiple times what they're trying to do with it, which to be clear is they think it adds commitment when you join a group. But I think in this day and age, that's just no longer true. I think in my mind, more people are turned off by the idea of being committed to something, which makes it so like, wait, what if my friend later in the week wants me to, like does a mythic raid or something like that? Then I can't. So I think the like after thinking about it for a while, I think the raid lockout prevents a lot more opportunities that it actually creates. Because I actually don't know how many people these days are like, oh, yeah, I'm sticking around because I'm tied to this group. Like, let's face it, people are going to leave the second they feel like their time is not valued.
Exactly.
Regardless of the lockout.
Yep.
So I think at this point, like, I think there's probably going to be some degen gameplay. As Growl said, people are going to force themselves to just try to find a pug that can finally kill Rashinan or something. But at least they're engaging with the content, probably.
Yeah, I mean, we learned that from our let's call it engagement with the community about Mythic Plus, about just find a group forehead. Like, I think we're a little bit on like Blizzard pilled when it comes to rating in that regard too, of like that's sort of what Blizzard is saying, right? Like Blizzard is saying, yo, just find a guild forehead, like, don't worry about lockout, just be in a guild. And it's like, in theory that works, but in practice it's like just like Mythic rating is very, very fun. Like Mythic Plus is very, very fun, and like people want to interact with it in different ways. And like, creating something that's that like Mythic Plus isn't really that replicatable in a lot of other games, and rating sort of is, but not in the same way that WoW is. And it's like
WoW rating is so
limiting
different.
off that pug world of saying like just find a guild. Unfortunately, like a lot of people just don't want to find a guild, and I think Blizzard just has to. And I think they are kind of sitting down and realizing like, okay, like we understand that playing in an organized group and making friends and playing together is fun, but like that's just not how everyone wants to interact with the system. But they're still having fun with the system and they want to play with it, right? And how do we make this more accommodating for those people? And I think they need to go in that direction, both in M Plus and in Raid.
I think I think that I was thinking about this the other day, and it's like I think that to me the biggest thing that's damaging Raid right now is, I would describe it as like the death of the casual hardcore guild. Like, those, and this isn't necessarily something that affects probably like heroic raiding guilds, but like those middle of the road like mythic guilds. I think that the death of the casual hardcore guild is negatively affecting the mythic raid experience like really, really poorly, and that's I think that's why we're seeing
the raids are hard.
I mean, the raids are really hard, and I think after Shadowlands 2, everybody had this like kind of COVID dynamic where prior to Shadowlands, people were very strict about their hours. You had the overtime police come in to get you if you raided outside your hours, and if you only killed 7 bosses out of the raid, that was totally fine. And then after Shadowlands, everybody ramped up their hours because everybody was like sitting inside, and like everybody had so much additional time, and everybody started rating just so much more, and it also became this expectation of, if we're not getting cutting edge or we're not getting Hall of Fame, why are we even trying? And I think that killed off all those casual hardcore guilds that I'm describing, and I think that is like, I don't really know what the fix is, because people kind of got into this like really competitive, and I think it's just like a state of gaming thing. People are like either like the most competitive you possibly can be, or they don't try at all, as opposed to having some nice middle ground.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a mix of both, right? Like the more casual scene just kind of wants to like pug. They don't want to make a commitment and be in a guild. They just kind of want to like.
They just do Mythic Plus too, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think there is going to be a point. I don't know how soon it'll be, but I think there's going to be a point where Blizzard is going to need to step in and save Mythic rating.
Mythic rating, I think, is in a lot of trouble right now. But
I think it is.
Okay.
It is definitely falling off a cliff right now. I think they are making a horrible mistake in their difficulty and catering to the race to world first. Because in order to challenge the race to world first and have a good race, they need to make the fights very difficult. And then they were better this time, but the fights are still extremely challenging mechanically. At this point, that buff that we talked about earlier, the Severed Threads, makes the fights really easy in terms of a DPS check. You will not struggle with the DPS check in the slightest. You could probably, most prog kills could do it a man down almost. It's all about the mechanics, though. No matter what, Webblades is still going to one-shot you. That is still the hardest mechanic I think Blizzard has ever made. So
you cite mechanics as well, but I think that there's also this spreadsheet raid leader debuff mechanic too, where your raid leader has to actually show up 7 hours prior to the raid starting and spreadsheet every single cooldown and every single like thing that's going on each and every single boss now too, because the bosses have become so difficult. And we're no longer in a situation where you can just like watch a video before the boss starts and like YOLO the boss. That's just like not a thing that you can even possibly do anymore. And and whether or not that's true or not, it's not necessarily true, but the expectation is that you come to raid like very prepared, and you've watched 100 hours of the Race to World First prior to zoning into the raid as well.
That's not Blizzard's fault.
I mean,
Blizzard cannot save that.
I mean, do you remember when I joined Might, like after raiding an AK for so long, and you guys were like, "Yep," and you're expected to know all of this stuff in advance, and I was like, "Preparation? What is this shit? I just show up and raid, man. Like, what are you talking about?" I completely agree with
you. Like, I completely agree with you for what it's worth. It's that is how the community has decided is the way you play World of Warcraft. And if you go against that grain, you will be scolded for it. Now, there are some guilds out there who are the exception where that is not expected, aka, my example of Erudite.
Yeah.
And that is known. But for the majority of guilds, you are expected to know the fight beforehand. That is just the typical norm, and that is not on Blizzard. That is not... I mean, it probably was caused by the difficulty increase of the fights, but even if they scaled them to be patchwork, look at Classic. You're expected to now know the fight in Classic.
Yeah.
When the boss fights are a lot easier.
But I will say that making them easier allows you to, I would say, play them a bit more casually. It requires less effort too to like, there's no reason that the raid leader of a guild needs to spend 3 hours on a boss beforehand, right? Like, I mean, can you? Yeah, probably. But like, should you? That's kind of the question, right?
I mean that's exactly what it is. It's will you need to? No. Will it be still expected? Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't like that. I hate that. That part, it takes a lot of the fun out of it. Like,
oh, I agree.
It literally turns it into a job, right? Like, it turns it into a job.
Yeah. I don't think they can come back, though. Go ahead, Growl.
The thing, though, is that, like... I think what it comes down to is the problem is the reward structure. So Mythic raiding, I think in and of itself is a good thing. Like, I think having incredibly challenging bosses or encounters that are growing with the community, right? Like, as people's add-ons get better, as people like get more skilled, as they want to try harder, like, it's good that these raid fights are crazy. Like, I see no problem with having bosses that take 500 pulls, 600 pulls, whatever. I just think, to me, the problem is that everybody wants to make their character stronger, and they gate a lot of the best gear behind these encounters. I think if they would just move either all of Mythic or like at least the end of Mythic to be something that's more like achievement driven, like you get a title or a mount or something or whatever, and I'm okay with it being really freaking cool too. Like, I definitely think you should feel deserved in getting that, but the problem is when getting the best gear in the game leads you down that path of having to do that, right? Like, I think if, for instance, heroic raids, you don't necessarily have to have that level of preparation or try that hard or whatever. And, you could, if the best gear in the game just came from like end bosses of heroic raids and like, not even plus 10 keys, but or like 8 to 10 or whatever, there wouldn't be that culture of like, we have to go super hard. Or rather, like, you wouldn't feel mad about it, right? Like, if you joined a Mythic guild that was trying to get Hall of Fame or whatever, absolutely what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And I just think that, like, that's, I guess, my biggest problem with it is, like, you funnel all these people who don't even necessarily not that they don't care about the challenge, but like, I just think that there's such, like, do people not see how big of a difference the 5th boss of the raid is from the 8th boss of the raid? Like, the fact that there's a boss that takes 300 pulls, that's like a couple bosses away from a boss that takes 50 pulls, like, that's a 6 times increase in difficulty or time investment or anything like that, right? Like, 6 times is a lot for the same difficulty curve, Like, imagine you're just playing a game and then you play one level and you're like, okay, and then the next level is just 6 times harder than the previous level, and it's just like, holy smokes. I just think that I'm okay with those crazy difficulty things being in there, but I just think that, I don't know, maybe like break up Mythic, or maybe like the end of Mythic doesn't, I don't know. I don't really have a great way to do it. I mean, the Band-Aid ripoff solution I've always suggested is just like remove Myth Track entirely and just leave Heroic as the best gear choice. And then, if people want to go into High Mythic Plus or, Mythic Raid, they're doing that on their own volition because they want the challenge. And then it would be so silly. Like, you would never complain about Mythic Raid if that was the case, right? Like, you never be like Mythic Raid is too hard, because just don't do it forehead, right? Like, if you're not having fun, then don't do it. But the problem is,
it would kill it.
It
would kill I think it would kill Mythic Raiding if you did that, though.
Why? You just think it's not fun enough then, or?
You want to be rewarded for your time, right?
I mean, I would argue a lot of the people that play Mythic Raiding are doing it for parses, they're doing it for guild rank, they're doing it for Hall of Fame, they're doing it for titles, they're doing it for sales, they're doing it for mounts. Like, I agree that it would definitely create a ripple in the scene, right? Because there are a lot of people spread throughout all these guilds that are only there to get loot. But to say that it would kill it, I think it would be a restructuring. There's
a couple different types of Mythic guilds. So there are the guilds that kind of we exist in, right? The Hall of Fame cutting, like very high end cutting edge level guilds. To get 20 players who are of that level, how did the players who are of that level get to that point? They probably at some point in their raiding career were in some guild that wasn't able to get cutting edge, and they were probably the best player in that guild. And they were like enamored, and like, how did they get to that point as well? They saw that Mythic raiding had either the best loot, or they liked the progression experience, and they thought that the fights were just cool. They wanted to kill the bosses early. There's a couple of different reasons that you jump into it, but gear is obviously part of it as well. And so you're in this guild that's like, probably killing like 5, 6, 7 bosses out of the entire raid. And those people are largely going to be doing it for loot, or they enjoy hanging out with one another on a weekly basis, and they just kind of enjoy the progression experience of like raiding once or twice a week. Then that person, or those two people who are the best in that guild, decide to move up and to continue to progress. Now, if you take loot out of the raid experience, of course, the people who are raiding at that cutting edge, really high end level, who are already established in the ecosystem of that raid, or of the game, already enjoy playing the game at that level, right? Like, a lot of us just play for the progression experience, but to get people to get to that point where they just enjoy it for the progression and not for, parsing or whatever, parsing or gear or whatever else, to get them to the point where they just enjoy it for the progression, I think you actually have to have some incentives to get people into raiding itself. It's kind of like, it's like filtering in, right?
It definitely won't increase the play. It definitely won't increase the amount of people Mythic raiding.
It will definitely have a drop off, but I don't think it's like an issue of like the high end player base. But I think it's going to be like a long term issue of the high end player base whenever more and more people quit gradually over time, and we don't have new people jumping into it.
It's kind of why I brought up this stuff in the first place. It's like, I feel like at some point they're going to need to bite the bullet and reduce 20 to a smaller number.
And it's kind of
at some point. I think at some point it's going to need to happen. I think 20 is grandfathered in for so many years, and it's the cause of so many people's problems. Like, we've talked, Tettles has talked about this, at least with me, for a while. He's like, I can grab 10 people on a whim. If I want to raid tonight, I can grab 10 people, let's go. 20? That's a tough ask.
There's no way I'm getting 20. Like, dude, we could get the people in Growl. We could get the people in Dorky Court and like slam together like a Friday raid if we wanted to, right? There's no shot that we're getting 20 people if we ever were trying. Like, we could get 10 though.
Big difference between 20. Well, it's also the difference in like I don't want to say quality, but like, how well you get along with those people and how much you relate to them with your goals. And it's
raid
like
group versus raid team, very different.
Yeah.
I mean, also, like, my personal preference is a smaller thing because I have more impact, right? Like, it's a lot harder for Blizzard to say 20 people do mechanic perfectly or wipe, rather than 10 people do mechanic perfectly or wipe. You have double the chance of wiping in a pass-fail check, right? Like, when there's double the people. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was, Growl, you mentioned other games like Lost Ark, Final Fantasy, and stuff like that. I think there's a problem in WoW where the leaderboards sites like WoW Progress, Reddit.io cause people to freak the fuck out about their ranking position. And that is why people are so dedicated to learn the fight, Because if you look at the other games, people learn on their own pace. You know, people do blind Final Fantasy progress because it doesn't matter when they finish. They just want to clear it for fun. Same thing with Lost Ark. Like, there's no leaderboard for it. You finish it on your own.
Okay.
And like,
I'm part of the problem, but I understand why these people exist like this. It's because whenever you like start WoW, you're like in some shitty AOTC guild, and you're like, what's next? And you go, okay, I guess I'm supposed to read Mythic. And then you're in some shitty cutting edge guild, and you're like, World 600th, and you're just like, well, what's next? And you go, well, I guess I'm supposed to go up in rank. And then you join some World 100th rank guild, and then you're like, wow, these people aren't as good as I thought. Now what? And then you're like, all right, we're raiding 75 hours a week, and we're joining some world rank 20th guild. And you're just like, well, what are you supposed to do? Like, I had this exact same, like, that is exactly my raid experience. That is how I raided for like, or like my general trajectory of like how I was joining raid guilds. And then you would just like leave them, and you're like, there was no sense of community. You were just trying to progress your guy and like get higher ranks. It's just progression.
For a job.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we could talk about Mythic Raid for like hours. I don't even know how we got on this topic, but
I don't know. Let's talk about the dinar. People complained about the dinar being too late because it's happening on week 16 of the patch. Is it a problem that it would be basically coming out this week of a patch, like a dinar?
I mean, there's two different things, right? Like the point of having very rare items is to make it so you have something to chase, and so like sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Like, you know, if they're gonna keep very rare items, then just putting dinars in that just let you get them on day one doesn't really serve a purpose. So like the point of a dinar is to, like, at least in this case of, okay, you get it 3 or 4 months into a patch, it's just sort of like to throw you a bone and like a little bit of bad luck protection. It's not meant to be a solution to, I guess, again, this comes down to, like, you know, the item drop rate, or, you know, giving ground to players or whatever. Like, it's not really quality of life. It's more like, you know, the whole, like, why even have rare items then? You know, like, what's the point of having a rare item and then you get to pick the rare item you want? It's like, okay, well, it's not rare. It's like the legendary that every player in the game gets. It's like, well, it's not very legendary.
Yeah.
Then,
I mean, I agree with Growl. Like, if they put it early, I think that defeats the whole purpose. I think this is the only medium that Blizzard would do to give you a sense of, wow, I got the item I wanted, but neutralize the feeling of, wow, I still haven't got this item I've been searching for weeks.
I think that they can maybe bump it up a few more weeks. Whenever somebody told me that, like, Renown 16 would have hit like last week or like 2 weeks ago, whenever I heard that, I was like, all right, maybe they could bump it up a couple of weeks. But at the same point,
I mean, let's take a look here.
Stuff like this actually makes me less inclined to like do prog rating. And so, like, for better or worse, like, whenever I see something like this, what I'm sitting here thinking of whenever I see something like this for my personal player, I'm like, instead of actually raiding prog, I'm like, wow, I'm going to clear the raid every single week, and at some point I'm going to get a max eye level Spymaster's Web. We are fucking back. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to raid prog, but I will get that Spymaster's Web. This is it.
I see no reason not to throw people a bone and let them get their biz stuff by the end of the patch. I think that, you know, again, WoW is very goal driven and rewards driven, and I think that if you're 4 months into a patch and you're still playing right now and you're, you know, completing some level of high level content, like, yeah, you know, you deserve to have almost every item.
I think this is totally okay.
Week 16 of season 1 was Christmas Eve, December 24th.
I mean, that's a while ago. That's almost a month ago.
Yeah, that is almost a month ago, actually.
I think that's just fine. I think that's a very good compromise.
It's slated to a patch, but it's still, like, you know, it's like Growl saying, it's like these people who are like still playing that late into the patch. I think it's totally fine to just throw them a bone and be like, yep.
I think it could have gone 1 or 2 weeks earlier. I agree with that.
I tend to agree.
But I don't think it's out of like, you are still going to get use out of this. There's still 2 to 3 months left of the season. This isn't like you get it for 1 week and then the patch ends. This is, you get it and it helps you with the last little bit of the season.
Yeah, you can still get cutting edge. You can still get whatever Mythic Plus, you know, whether it's title or portals or whatever your goal is. Like, I know it's not really relevant as much lately, but, you know, your PvP rating or whatever, like, for the most part, for a lot of WoW people that are rewards driven who are playing till the end of the season, like, that end of the season time matters the most. Like, we're, leaving that world a little bit now in Mythic Plus, but Mythic Plus was always like that, where like you don't even care about Mythic Plus until the last 6 weeks. Like, you can be rank 1 on the leaderboard for the entire season, and then the last month, Timbermaw decides to come out of hiding, and then now you're the 7th healer in the world. And it's like, that's just how it is. Like, the end of the season is the most important part because that's when people have the gear and everybody's like the most equalized.
Look at this, by the way, Growl. Our region is so dead.
Oh, jeez.
People today have stopped playing.
Weird tangent. Is this because there's just a lack of push weeks? Like, people are done?
I think it's a mix of a lot of things. Like, I think for a while, like, 2 of the biggest team. Well, okay, actually, let me step backwards. To me, the biggest thing that it comes down to is TGP and MDI have gotten bigger prize pools, and they're like more frequent and more of the end game now. Like, I don't really think playing on ladder and like being very high ranked on ladder is like something that many people go for. There were some people, honestly, one of the biggest teams that drove that was Ambition, or like Nerf and Ellismere and them, and they've kind of slowly died down. And it's like, yeah, I just think that there's not a lot of people who are like, really, really driven to push. And again, like, this shit's hard, man. Like, the keys that people are doing right now are hard. Like, it's not to say there aren't good players in NA, but like, there are so many crazy good teams in China, and like Kira's team, and the Echo guys and stuff, and it's like, this is hard freaking competition to like, it's just, I don't know, Mythic Plus is really hard. I think that there's not a big NA. To be fair, like, there's never really been a crazy big NAM plus scene. Like, it just comes down to like, does this small subset of players like want to stick together and push a while, right? Like, there is the Ellismere team. Like, every once in a while, Liquid kind of puts together some team in some regard, with Evade or whoever. It's like, Fired Up might make
Shaq Fired Up and Greg might play.
Yeah, exactly.
Play
Right? Like,
something. Yeah.
Greg might decide to go super hard. Like, it kind of just depends, but yeah.
I think availability of tanks is also a big deal with...
I saw your tweet about that.
Well, with NA specifically, dude, NA has this weird issue where we have some of the best tanks, but they aren't necessarily willing to play, or if they're not, or willing to play tank, or like, they get like into like a mood where they're just like really upset with the state of the role itself. Like, Greg, depending on how fun the role is, he is either willing or unwilling to play tank, and that is how it is for him. Same with T1. T1, again, these are 2 of the top tanks in our region, and both of those players, if the role isn't fun, they are just not going to play tank, and that ends up hurting us, like, because then you just have fewer groups for the high end. And that's just talking about the high end. My tweet was mostly bitching about just the bottlenecking that tanks.
Oh yeah.
Did you see that tweet, Growl? I was complaining about bottlenecking of tank.
I did not. I've been kind of keeping an eye on Twitter, but I haven't watched it. I haven't seen your tweet.
It was this. It says, I think the lack of tanks is especially concerning right now. Having players being bottlenecked into not getting groups for 30 plus minutes because of lack of tanks is problematic. Not sure what the solve is, but should be a pretty big priority on Blizzard to fix. And then people were responding. T1 actually said a broken role economy completely ruins all aspects of LFG Mythic Plus. Not only is it impossible to play without a 30-minute wait for the tank, but the wait time also ruins the gameplay for any DPS who want to pug that aren't playing the perfect class, plus an extremely overqualified for the key.
Yeah, everything T1 says there's 100%. That's like what I try and tell everybody is like, that's where that bottlenecks, right? Is that, okay, well, that's why people are like, oh, everyone in WoW is so elitist. And it's like, well, if there was tons of tanks everywhere and there's tons of groups being formed, then you wouldn't always be so elitist, right? Because there'd be tons of groups and tons of people sitting around and be like, maybe we shouldn't be such dumbasses, right? But the reason you can be very, very picky with only inviting meta classes or overqualified people is because, well, just sit there for 30 seconds and then they appear because they're waiting because they can't get groups.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I don't really have a good fix for it either. I'm not really sure. I think one difference between NA and EU, and I know some people might disagree with this, is that EU, I think, has sort of realized that tanking is a high pressure and a hard role, and they've sort of tried to alleviate that shot caller part of being a tank. And I'm seeing more people in EU like Dr. J and Gingy, and this has been something over the last few years of them like taking command and leading the group, and like the tank is sort of there, but it's not necessarily like the leader per se. Whereas I feel like in NA, it's like, okay, who's our tank? Okay, it's Greg or it's Nerf or whatever. Like, okay, well, all right, they're coming, and then you invite them. It's like, okay, what's the route? Like, what are we doing? And then I feel like DPS and NA are also a little bit more complacent with like the amount of effort they want to put into like call stuff and organize stuff. Like, I think it's hard because like I also agree that tanks are a little bit like apathetic and not wanting to play. But you know, I think if there was like, I mean, I guess it's hard to replicate somebody like Gingy or Dr. J, but if there were more of those people, I feel like you'd see more groups form around them.
That's definitely true at the high end on NA. What I will say, just from the more broader ecosystem, is I think that exact thing that you talked about is difficult to get rid of on like a pug level, because the tank is just in control of so much of what's going on. They're in control of like the pacing, when the mobs are getting pulled, how the mobs are getting pulled. They're largely in control of the route, and I think it's actually difficult for them to not just have that much stuff going on for them.
In pugs 100%.
Yeah, in a pug, they are like, I don't know, the key lives or dies basically by the tank. Probably 90% of your key success is going to be whether or not this tank is actually competent.
We went on a lot of tangents.
Oh my god. Yeah, any final,
just the usual, fix mythic rating, make tanking better.
Any final thoughts on the Renown track? I mean,
classic.
I think this is great. Like, I think that this is good. I think this is going to be a long-term loyalty rewards club. I think it's going to be something that we're going to see every single patch.
I hope so.
Hopefully, I think this is going to turn out nice. I think this will be fun.
I hope so.
Oh. Okay. All right. So new 2850 IO mount has dropped, and it's actually kind of sick. I think the model of this thing is badass. It's a crawler. It looks like a mob that you would fight in the Mechagon outdoors. That's kind of the vibe that it's called, and it's called the Enterprising Shredder Tank. And so Blizzard has heard your cries that there are not enough rewards for Mythic Plus. There's nothing in between doing basically KSM and getting the rank 1 title. And so they have added a mount at 2850 rating, which is actually pretty high.
It's between 11s and 12s. It's like half 11s, half 12s.
Okay.
That's not bad.
That's a good
higher.
benchmark for it.
It's probably about top 5% of the player base right now, or at 2850.
Well, also keep in mind 12s are not a jump anymore, right? Or like they are, so
I think it's all right. I think it needed more rewards. This is a good start. I think it probably needs one more something. But this is better than a reward which prevents your key from depleting at 12.
Would you give it Would you give it Dinar at 3K?
Oh, Dinar.
Oh man,
Lord. Sales would be glorious.
We would be so back. Oh shit, I would never have to raid again.
Mythic plus Dinar though.
That would be crazy. A Mythic
get your eggshell.
That would be good. That would be elite. A Mythic plus Dinar at 3K. Hold on, now we're cooking.
I logged into my priest the other day to like just like I don't know, whatever, just because I was, you know, getting back into the game. My priest still never got any Mythic Plus trinkets from the vault ever, from like 14 weeks or 16 weeks or whatever playing. Not one single of my BIS M Plus trinkets.
The problem with Mythic Plus trinkets is that there's 1.5 Mythic Plus trinkets a season that are good. It might be one, it might be two, but there's not that many that are very good.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going to complain about this. That's my thought of the mount.
You think it's going to increase the amount of participation for Mythic Plus actually trying to go for mounts like this? I actually think the answer is probably yes.
Because I will do this for the mount.
Oh.
And I stopped at 10s. So
I'll say it. I think this is good then. Yeah, if this is actually going to increase the participation rate inside of Mythic Plus, I think that this is just, you know, people talked about this before. They wanted more achievement-based stuff to kind of continue to give you something to strive for, and I think that this is a banger. I was accepting, you know, recolors on transmogs, and so the fact that they're giving us a cool new mount is badass.
I would also accept a recolor transmog.
I would have accepted anything, frankly. In other news, raid testing has continued. Have you guys done raid testing at all?
No, I'm actually like totally mega blind right now about the raid. I've like glanced a little bit at some streams, but to me, I'm like getting super. What's that raid that I never did, but I saw a lot of? Was it Hellfire Citadel or like?
That was a raid, yeah.
I don't know if that's the right raid though.
That was a WOD raid. I have a suspicion that you're talking about one of the Antorus or like Humus Argyris maybe.
What's the one with the trains?
Ogre. Blackrock Foundry.
What raid is that? Blackrock Foundry. That's what I'm thinking of.
That is a legacy raid. That is such a good one.
Just like machines and kind of like, like that. That's the kind of vibe, especially from this fight right here that you're showing off.
These raid fights are badass. I will say there's a lot going on, but the fights themselves are actually incredibly cool and honestly pretty fun to do. Now we've only done heroic testing, but all of the bosses that I've done so far are actually really cool.
I mean, yes. I mean, this is what we said about not Aberrus. What is this called? Nerebar Palace 2. The heroic fights, super fun. I think you recall, like, you asked me, we had to talk about the Mythic raid because I made an offhanded comment like, I'm not looking forward to Mythic.
Yeah.
And that is because these fights look great on heroic, and then Mythic comes around and it adds a kind of cringe mechanic that makes everything not great.
Yeah, like, I mean, to be honest, it's funny that you say that because I remember watching these VODs and thinking along those lines of like, in terms of like the cluster and like the amount of things going on, and I'm thinking like, this is about right, or maybe even a little bit too much, This is
like a Mythic boss. This felt like a Mythic boss, straight up.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at how much is going on the screen right now. Like, there's swirlies, and there's dodging, and there's positioning, and then you have these like conveyor belts, and obviously, I don't quite know everything that's going on, and like we don't really have strategies for the fights. But at the same time, like, for this, not even to like, there's like look at like to think that there's another.
I'm getting I got bitrate drop on my stream because of so much shit that's going on.
Yeah.
You can tell the bitrate of my stream.
Difficulty after this is like, man, it feels like, when you're doing a fight on heroic and you're like, damn, that's really fun, that's really good, but it's us, like, try hard, long-time WoW players, that's a little bit of a red flag for Mythic.
I'm doing this with like the entirety of DMG's guild, right?
So here's my thoughts, like overall thoughts on the raid. I think the fights are super cool right now. I think their new swirlies and their new line like outlines, fantastic. Like, they are so clear and so nice. Part 2, though, I think their cones look so fucking bad compared to their new swirlies. And the codal effects need an upgrade next, but that's a different story, and I'll take the swirlies for now. And the second thing that you kind of just brought up, which is interesting, is the visual overload in this raid is insane.
Every boss is fucking crazy.
Every boss has a bunch, like, I'd say about 25% too many visual effects that don't matter. Like, they look cool, but they just get in your way. Do you have a video of the trash boss?
This one?
No, the one with the garbage, the kind of
No, I don't have one of those. Okay. We talked about last week though.
Yeah, it was also I mean, that boss there was just like laser beams that didn't do anything and they were just for visual effect on that last boss. It's just a lot. But overall, the boss fights are so unique. Like, this one is a slot machine. And
I thought this fight was gonna suck, and this fight was sick.
You get to choose the slot machine, like what shows up on the reels, and depending on what you get there, it summons a different effect. And at 40%, it goes through all the reels once, and then you explode. You
have to shoot the chips through the boss too. Like, it's actually crazy.
Yes. So, this theming wise, fantastic.
I think this is the best theme that they've had for a raid in a really long time, and I've actually had a lot of fun playing the heroic bosses. I think that these are some of the most well-designed heroic bosses I've seen in a hot minute. Now, there is one fight, though, that I have to critique, and it's the penultimate fight here. I actually don't even remember what the name of this fight is, but it's the
Mug-Zee or
something. This boss is awful. We spent the entire hour raid testing it, and I still don't... I understand the mechanics, but I still don't understand the objective of the boss. Like, what the hell am I doing? The boss also has a smoke bomb, Echo of Neltharion style, like encasing thing that you get trapped in for a while. Then we started doing this strat on the left hand side as opposed to doing the strat on the right hand side. Let me see if I have visuals on us doing the right hand side strat.
So I mean, just for context.
I mean, look at this.
Yeah, there are two sides of the room. The boss will activate a phase based on which side has more players. Doing this for the viewers and not for Growl.
Growl needs this too.
I know, I'm an expert.
No. Growl's in the know. He's surely in the know.
Yeah, I know everything.
Yeah. So basically, whichever side the boss is on, you have a different set of mechanics. You kind of just flip flop them back and forth at certain times. You can't keep it on one side for too long, and you can't swap too often. So you're basically just swapping it on a timer. On one side, you have these. If you go back again, yeah, so you have these little jails, and they spell jail like the old school jail, GAOL. I don't know why, but either way, it locks those people inside until you kill the ad. And then also on heroic difficulty, there are I think like 5 or 6 ice shards. You just saw them a few seconds ago. I'm sure they will pop up again, but the ice shards will target a player and fire at them.
Yeah.
If it hits a player, they are dead.
Ooh. We could not figure out.
You can see those ice shards there. So you need them to hit a wall, or you die.
For the life of us, we could not figure out what the strat of this boss was, and what we landed on was the craziest shit ever, where we would start with a mage plus the person who got targeted with this circle. They duo soaked it, yeah, and the mage blinked out, and then we evoker rescued the other players out of the jail, then used the ice sickles to pierce this thing, and then we killed the goons with the entirety of the raid. We also tried a strat where we would like Venn diagram them and try to kill them together, but that sucked, and you couldn't actually hit the boss because, again, this is a smoke bomb style effect inside these jails. Like, if you're outside the area of this, you actually can't hit inside of it at all, including the boss.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be something that's going to need to be solved. Like,
I don't know what the strat is even supposed to be. This
people keep saying weak aura, but I don't even know how a weak aura would help you with this.
Again, I did an hour of this boss. I don't even know what the fuck was going on. Like, it's actually an insane fight. And then you go over to the other side, and the other side is actually a lot more chill. I can't lie. But there's a big cheese strat on how you can actually do the left side where you just mass root the mines perma. And so we did that instead. But basically, there are these bombs that spawn. And whenever you soak them, they put a vulnerability debuff on the entirety of the raid for a couple of seconds. They do an insane amount of damage. And so I think what you're supposed to do is you're actually supposed to just like soak them one at a time. But they spawned like 9 of them. It's just like an insane amount of them. And so yeah, I don't really know what the strat is supposed to be.
You can disarm the bomb. See that line there? When the person soaks it, that circle disarms the bombs.
Uh-huh.
So you can see that one's probably about to be disarmed. Oh, it didn't for some reason. Was it caged or something? I believe that's how it's supposed to work.
I think it's a different circle probably that's supposed to disarm the bomb. I think it's a different circle. I think it's probably supposed to be the soak circle then.
I'm not 100% sure. Either way, this boss feels like a mythic boss.
This boss did feel like a mythic boss, but it felt like a mythic boss that was like missing mechanics, and which is weird because this boss you would argue probably has too many mechanics, but it felt like it was missing like direction. Like I felt like I was doing the mechanics, but I didn't have good objectives.
Yeah, and then just in case, like I don't think anybody got there from what I saw at 40 or like at 40% or something. He does an intermission.
Oh hell no, I was never making that far.
Yeah, and then he does all the mechanics at once.
Hell no.
And permanently gains the stacking buff. So like, who the fuck knows how you're supposed to do this boss? Like, I'm sure it'll be tuned. That Ice Shards mechanic looks absolutely awful. I'm sure Growl would love to do that in his guild.
I think this boss is... The rest of the bosses were fantastic. This boss sucked. I was not a fan. I think that, you know, the biggest complaint from people are probably going to be these goon jails, where people aren't going to actually... like, they're going to complain about line of sight. A lot of healers are already complaining about line of sight on these goon jails. I suspect that that's going to maintain, but you know, at the same point, I think that they probably should be looking to rework this boss, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I really love line of sight mechanics as a healer in Raid.
I mean, this boss just wasn't that fun either. Like, I don't know.
It's a lot. Like this jail mechanic is a lot for heroic, in my opinion. Like, so the way it works is you can't stack them because the goons enrage. You can't have the boss in them because the goons enrage. So you have to separate them, and like that means you have two people who need healing in. Also, if there's no one inside them, the goons enrage. So it basically forces at least one person in two separate jails.
Yes.
Or else the goons enrage. Which means you need to separate a couple people who are in there who do nothing but hit and add the entire time. Which feels bad. And then you have to pierce the thing, pierce the walls
these
with
people,
the ice shards.
These people who are in the jail also can't be targeted by people who are outside, nor can you do damage to these mobs. Yeah, exactly. It's really weird. Like, it felt wrong. Like, I felt like I wasn't doing the boss correctly, but it was correct. I don't really understand.
The good news is that those ice shards do not exist on normal mode. Meaning normal's gonna be great. It's gonna be a good boss fight.
Shout out to all the normal raiders.
Shout out normal. Yeah. I mean, this is heroic though. I could feel like there are very few bosses that I've kind of complained about on heroic, but that is definitely one of them where I'm like, I see the writing on the wall of that fight being sucking ass on Mythic too, and you're just like, dude, this fight sucks.
It's definitely an odd one because it feels like there's no progression. You just kind of swap sides until he hits 40%, and then you have to kill him before he kills you.
But the rest of the heroic fights are actually some of the coolest I've ever seen. So, you know, that's there's some give and take. Maybe there's going to be a bad one, but maybe the rest of them are going to be sick.
Yeah.
Who really knows? This is genuinely one of the coolest raid tiers I've played in a hot minute.
Have you seen all of them? I know they haven't done heroic testing for some of them yet, but
I think there's one boss that hasn't been tested on heroic because they canceled heroic testing.
I think there was two.
The
Vixie and the Gear Grinders, the Mad Max one.
Oh yeah, we didn't do that one either. Okay, so
then Rick Reverb, the DJ.
Okay, so so there's two that haven't been tested. Plus, obviously the last boss, they don't test those anymore. Yeah, I think that these have been really, really cool bosses. I'm excited to see how they test on Mythic. Okay, talk about the dungeons a little bit. So we got all 4 of the War Within dungeons available to us on the PTR this week. And have you guys had a chance to take a look at any of these, or not really?
I haven't played them, but I've been watching some beta streams. I think Yoda's been playing some. Jack's been playing some. Jack's been putting out some good beta stuff, or not beta, PTR, same thing.
What's your impression?
To me, every single PTR there, or every single like group of dungeons, there's always like the one nice chill X dungeon. It seems like Cinderbrew is the dungeon that everyone's having fun doing. I feel like half the time I tune into anybody, they're doing Cinderbrew. You're just like, maybe it's just a DPS thing, but they're just doing like really, really big pulls, and you just like, you know, die to trash, and then your giant first pull with lust, like keep going, pull big, like you wipe whatever, who cares, go again, like, and then Darkflame Cleft. To me, it didn't seem as bad. Like, people are mega dooming it. I mean, obviously, the minecart in the darkness is like a bad mechanic. The other 2 dungeons, it feels like they made some changes to Priory.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
they changed some of the
like
mobs
removing some mobs and stuff. I don't know. In theory, it's one of those things where like the beginning area seems like, oh, cool, you know, choose your own adventure, pull whatever you want. But I think there's going to be like sort of a meta where everybody does the same thing. I don't think it'll be that interesting. They seem okay. I don't know. I guess like it seems like continuance of what I saw from Operation Mechagon 2.0 or whatever the other one's called.
Floodgate, yeah.
It seems like there's a little bit less mechanical density, and like there are some areas with a lot of casters, I guess, but like it just seems like a lot of like mobs that hit you, and like I guess like archers, a lot of range mobs, I guess. Like I don't know. I kind of like I don't have any strong opinions yet. It's hard when you're not doing like high keys and like seriously tryharding to you know, when you're pushing it to his limits. I don't know, what do you think?
I think Squishy, have you played them?
I have not played them, but I just want to comment like philosophically, because I know you have. So I just want to say philosophically, the changes this week where they removed some tank busters, they removed like they added a cast time to Consecrate in Priory, which is like the thing everybody was freaking out about because everybody knows that Consecrate just destroyed melee. Like Darkflame Cleft, they knew to increase the radius. I mean, you can tell me how that felt after, but and then increasing cast times. These are all good changes, so I don't really have any complaints.
I tend to agree that those are definitely good philosophical changes, like moving in the right direction, especially if they're actually taking the feedback that tanking was too hard from like the season and moving that forward and being like, all right, maybe we need to make the dungeons a little bit easier. That's actually a pretty nice thing. I think in general, something that I have with like the season 1 War Within dungeons, I wasn't necessarily looking forward to playing them, but I will say something about the season 2 dungeons that's a little bit different is I'm actually looking forward to playing them whenever they come out. I do think that there are obviously problems with some of them, and I mean we could talk about some of the problems, but like I think just in general I'm a lot more optimistic about these dungeons than I was War Within season 1 dungeons.
Oh, for sure. I think the dungeon pool has more to say about that too, because like number 1, we have 4 new dungeons plus a new dungeon, right? So really 5.
Yeah.
And then we also have Motherload, which I think is like, you know, something that we're all looking forward to seeing again. And then what is it? Theater of Pain and Workshop.
I hate Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain
new
sucks.
Workshop, I think the new workshop will be good. Maybe that's cope, but I think the new workshop will be good. That the first boss was kind of cringe previously, and I think it's gonna be better now with the changes. I think Theater of Pain is probably still gonna be cringe, but we'll see.
Theater of Pain was just like not very fun.
And 5 bosses, which like nobody wants a 5 boss dungeon because it takes forever.
Yeah, there's never been a good 5 boss dungeon. Those are just the rules.
I don't think Theater of Pain had that many like really abusive mechanics. I just think that it felt very slow because there was basically like 5 bosses. Also, there was tons of mini bosses, and then when there wasn't, like in the very small area that you could pull big, it was like those really really nasty caster guys, like the disease guys that would jump out and then do that disease that full wipe you if one of them gets off, and it's like, and then there's the big, I don't know, it just felt like
the big lieutenant wing where you literally could not change pull.
Yeah, exactly.
It just made it very hard for you to like be creative or pull big. Like I don't think any individual like bosses and mechanics in there were that bad.
What I'm gonna say,
definitely not looking forward to it coming back.
We probably spent 15 minutes last week talking about healing on the move. There are a lot of heal on the move bosses from this season, by the way.
So I was gonna say that. So when you were talking about tanking, that was something that I feel like they are deliberately paying attention to. Whether it's just a coincidence by the things they're tuning or whatever, but it does feel like tanking has been made a little bit easier. A lot of the density of tank busters, especially against bosses, and again, it could just be a key level thing, but it doesn't feel like there's nearly as many bosses that are just like constantly slamming you and enforcing like a very very strict defensive rotation like there are with like, you know, every Grim Batol boss, for example, right? And but I do think that healing, you know, we'll see how that goes, but I do feel like, you know, with this whole let's not have as many kicks, let's just make unavoidable damage and swirlies and archers, I do think healing could be a bit scarier, but at the same time, like, you know, you sort of, it's one of those things that's really hard and you just have to wait and see once everyone gets good gear and like, you know, I mean, even going into this expansion launch, everyone was like, had no fucking idea what was going on with healing because, you know, everyone was playing Resto Shaman.
Yeah, I mean, I think or by the time you watch today's episode, we're gonna see how the returning 3 dungeons are, right? That would be Motherload, Theater, and Workshop.
Yeah, so we're recording this Monday night, so Tuesday, the next rotation comes out tomorrow. Then
supposed to. I mean, if the PTR comes up, it didn't.
The PTR was really delayed. I remember that actually.
But theoretically, we should see how those are, and
I mean, Carassus went into M0 Motherload and was giving me some reports on a bunch of the mob changes.
I could have, but it seems like they need a patch. Like, they may not have patched and everything. Like, they didn't patch all the returning 4 dungeons until this week's build.
Gotcha.
So, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, there are some upcoming Workshop, Motherload, or Theater changes in this build.
I mean, there's some stuff that's definitely going to stay. He said there were, like, a lot more pre-piloted peacekeepers and stuff like that as well. A bunch of weird stuff going on. But yeah, I mean, for the dungeons this week, I had a couple of notes on each of the dungeons. I felt like this dungeon that Growl talked about, Cinderbrew Meadery, this is actually probably my favorite dungeon, but I think a lot of it comes down to just like mob density. This is like, I would describe it as like the heavy trash, like the hard trash dungeon, where there's a lot of hard hitting trash. A lot of the trash is what you're really focused on dealing with super well. The bosses are pretty easy. In the first area, you go just like absolutely ham on. You do just like absolutely massive pulls in this first area. And on top of that, there's like really not that many kicks just in general. I liked this dungeon. I thought this dungeon felt pretty fun to play.
I mean, what we learned from Reaping is that people just want big pulls, so...
Big pulls, easy bosses. Please God, easy bosses. There was also the Rookery. I hate the Rookery.
People suspected that was going to be the favorite, but
it's
there was so many caster mobs in that dungeon, right? Like it feels like there's like every single, like I remember that whole hallway like going downstairs. I mean, like I'm just remembering from Heroic, but it just like I don't know, it just this was I don't know how lethal some of these casters are, but to me it's just like that's where this was the dungeon that. Until this dungeon, I kind of felt like I saw the theme of them not having as many casts and stuff, and then I saw this dungeon, I'm like,
it's
maybe.
Mostly mob design is my issue here. On top of that, there's these thunder mobs, and they're coded to like be in combat, and so like random effects will target them. Like Mage has like some bird that spell steals some buff, and it just like randomly targets the thunders and pulls them.
Okay, but that'll probably be fixed. Like,
I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, that's complete.
How is this a problem every single season of every single expansion, where there's like mobs randomly in combat and stuff randomly pulls? Like, you would think at some point they would have this figured out by now.
Okay.
My favorite one is not that. It's the one where if you target something else that is out of line of sight, it applies an effect to that thing. Like,
oh, that's a banger. That's a good one.
Yeah, that was the Shadowlands stuff.
That was the death grip thing. Yeah, anyways.
So let me introduce you to my favorite pack of the entire dungeon. And there are these cursed thunderers, and they are cursed.
Is that their actual name?
Yes, that is their actual name.
Okay.
And man, they cursed. They are what I would describe as an archer mob with the ability Lightning Bolt. And they spam the shit out of this sucker, and it is literally just on site. And they are the most annoying mobs. It's not like this is like if you have a solar beam, you're chilling. If you are rotating your CC, you're fine. If you're not, you are in deep despair because these mobs spam Lightning Bolt, like just straight up cast it over and over again. It is terrible. So that's not very fun. There's also, I feel like, a visual missing on this boss. What do you think the boss is about to do here? Just
frontal
ability-wise. You think a frontal?
Looks like a frontal.
This is the get off the vents mechanic, right?
Yeah, this is the get off the vents mechanic. It goes out in 4 different directions.
Yeah.
Why there's no visual for it? What? It's a great question. Nobody really knows.
I was watching one Azeroth pug this dungeon, and it was just like, you know, as a tank, you can't really do much, but like every single time you pug, it's just a new team, and it's just not telegraphed at all.
There's no
like,
telegraph.
The boss just goes in the middle, and then all of a sudden, it's just like dead. Like even in like a not very high key.
Does it fire at? It fires what? Like at an X?
At the grates. It's always at these grates. It's just one of those things that like until you know how the pattern is, there's just no telegraphing. The first time I died to it, I was just like, I understand why I died, but I was just like, why does that not telegraph? Why am I not getting shown that I'm about to die to this? That felt really weird.
That probably is. I'm okay with frontals without a telegraph on a boss that big. I know we said that like last week or something.
Yeah,
but that is not a frontal, and that is definitely not very clear.
The only other mob that I actually had a problem with this entire dungeon was these crusher mobs. They do an ability called Void Crush. And
is that the suck guy?
No, it's the leap drop a ground effect guy. And so they cast this Void Crush, and then they just drop this expanding purple puddle that if you get ticked by it, I almost got 100-0. I got 80% of my health ticked away. And it's like, so you can like make them recast. It just feels really weird. It creates this ground clutter, like pretty big ground clutter in like relatively narrow corridors. They just don't feel like that great of mobs. Yeah. And then third boss is sick. I actually think that this is one of the coolest bosses they've designed in a while. I think this guy, or the second boss, sorry. Second boss, I think is one of the coolest bosses.
I was going to say, yeah, for me, the third boss is the one with the shields and stuff, right?
This is the worst boss they've ever designed, and I'm guaranteed.
They just redesigned this boss.
Okay, I'm glad you said this because I was going into this with the under impression that like this was terrible. And so for you to be like, oh, this was the best boss they ever designed, I'm like, all right, I'm ready for him to cook.
No, money back guaranteed. They're reworking this last boss.
Again?
I'm 100% sure they're reworking it. There's no way. Okay, let me explain to you the strat on this fight. So what you need to know about the mechanics of this fight, they changed it. Pillars spawn every so often, and pillars spawn around the boss. You can get up to 3 per side, and then in addition to that, the way you clear the pillars is there are circles that are on players. 4 players get the circles. It's everybody except for the tank. The tank has like a frontal beam going off at the same time, so they don't get a circle. They don't really clear any of these pillars. What you have to do is you have to have one player that's on this far side. Your healer is going to be standing in the middle because otherwise they wouldn't have range on all of your DPS. And then your other DPS is standing on this side. Then you're having the most mobile DPS. In this case, we're using a mage here, playing our flex. Basically, anytime there are 2 pillars on one side, they need to double blink over to our side and actually help us soak and actually make sure that these pillars are able to get dealt with. And because like how these pillars work is they come out, and most of the time they're not actually in range of one another. Here I can actually get both of these soaked with just one circle, but more often than not you're actually going to need to have somebody come help you. And what actually happened here, and we made a mistake, is our healer doesn't actually go and get his pillar, so we're having an ad spawn. And these ads, whenever they spawn, if you get one of them, you're basically wiping. They do way too much damage. And this fight is a combination of the ads do too much damage, and the pillar mechanic has too heavy of a coordination check for anybody who's not in a group of 3,500 IO plus players who are in voice with one another, because you're not YOLOing this mechanic. The movement that is required to get all these pillars soaked is not something that is YOLOable outside of voice. Like, it is an insane mechanic.
Okay, I mean, devil's advocate here. I don't think it's a bad mechanic. I just think it's tuned badly.
So you think you should be allowed to spawn an ad?
I mean, you said it yourself. The ad is just tuned badly. If it kills you, there's no point in it. So it just needs to be tuned down. But I think what they can do is, 1, stop making the pillars so far away. I think that's like a number 1 fix.
Let me look at this. So we had to have our mage come from all the way over here, double blink across the purple swirlies to help me soak this pillar, basically.
Oh, I completely agree. Like, I think
I'm also out of range of the healer the entire time. Like, I don't know, man.
I think the pillar's spawning too far away. I think the ad should not kill you if it spawns. You should be allowed to miss one. And thirdly, what was it? I forgot.
Just die. Like, I don't know.
From a healer, this just looks like
genuinely. What do you do if you're a
nightmare.
Pres Evoker too? Like, dude, 25 yard range, and this is a fight where if your healer had 70 yards worth of healing, they would probably still be outranged by people at some points.
Yikes!
Like, this is an look at how far Crit Cake is from the rest of the he is so far from my character here.
No, I completely agree with that. I don't think I think what they're going for is like a Neptulon type thing where you have to clear. I think if they gave people more time, that was the third thing then. More time before the debuff explodes. So that people can get there quickly without movement.
There are 2 things too that I didn't necessarily mention. First and foremost, you can get up to 3 per side, and this is the nightmare situation right here where we get 2 on left and 2 on right. Because then at that point it's basically everything out the window. How are we supposed to get all 4 of these soaked? Because this one is in the middle of absolute nowhere. This one's this one's kind of close to middle, so you can maybe help. But like I think this fight needs a rework. I think this fight sucks. It's not, and it's fine if you have people who are 3,500 IO in voice, it's doable. It's not a fight that's undoable. It's just not a good boss, and I think it's one that the coordination is way too high for anybody who's like pugging a key ever.
Okay, let's say they tuned the damage down and they made the debuffs double duration, 12 seconds.
If you don't start standing in the correct spot, you're also fucked, right? Like you have to pre-assign placements for people to actually start and to know where they're supposed to be, right?
I mean, okay, like if a crystal spawn closer, the timer that you have to get to the locations with the debuff is out is longer. Either the debuff itself or the timer, like you can pre-stand on your crystal.
Yeah.
Does that not solve your problem though? Like,
I mean, maybe that does actually solve it. I don't know. There's also a bug. There's also a bug right now where if you phase the boss at a weird time, then you actually don't get the debuffs to clear the crystals, and you just immediately wipe.
Sure.
But that's certainly not intended. That I think that's
Okay,
just
so
something
like
that fixed.
look at this here, right? Like, so you have you barely any time since the crystal spawn to figure shit out. That is unacceptable, right? This is Mythic raid weak aura difficulty levels. Press the macro.
This is an insane fight. Like it is great.
So,
it is like a
they have
Mythic boss.
They have specifically said that they do not like this. So I think they're going to change it and make it more reasonable. And I think that is exactly how they will do it. But I agree with you that is completely unacceptable right now. I just don't think it requires a rework.
Okay.
Personally, I think the old boss fight was way worse.
I mean,
I
this fight watching this was giving me nightmares.
I don't know, man.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine doing this as a healer. The tank is literally doing nothing on this boss except for tanking the frontal as well. Like, I don't know.
I think the tank should also get a 5th one, personally.
That's what I was thinking. I think there's no reason that the tank shouldn't get one, and then but the issue with the tank getting one right now.
Just delete the frontal. I just think you delete the frontal.
I'm down. I'm literally down for you to delete the frontal. There's no. It's not a necessary mechanic.
If this is just soak the boss and win, I think that is a perfectly fine design.
It's soak the boss, and your healer has to get a perfect dispel, and there's also you have to stun the boss with his dragon or no, you have to stun the trash mobs with the dragon.
Yeah, you just break the shield.
Yeah, I don't know. Our healer's also like stasising his dispel on crit kick to make sure that he can, because stasis doesn't have a range, and so he has to stasis his dispel on crit kick whenever he's far onto the other side to make sure that he can get the dispel off in time. Otherwise, he dies like I died here. Absolute bananas mechanic. Darkflame Cleft. I would describe. I think this is exactly the boss or exactly the dungeon that people thought it was going to be. The first 3 bosses of this dungeon were honestly fantastic. No complaints. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the trash, but I thought in general these were actually pretty good parts. There were some issues with like Candle King, but I think these are problems that Blizzard are just going to fix at some point. Candle King TLDR is just like it's slightly doing a little bit too much damage, so you have to have immunes to be able to like deal with it. These are things that Blizzard's likely to fix.
It's just normal WoW player things.
Okay, so they increased the movement speed on this minecart. And this minecart is not moving much faster. It moves maybe slightly faster whenever you're out of combat, but I don't think it moves fast enough. It really feels like you're just like sitting in traffic waiting. And I genuinely think that this darkness mechanic is one of the worst mechanics they've ever designed. I think that you should get like warmth, and like if you're, for the first like 4 or 5 seconds after you're out of the light, then you're still like eligible to hit mobs, but as it currently stands, you just immediately drop and like start doing 0 damage, and it feels
I
leeway,
agree with that part. On your comment of the minecart moving slowly, you are missing the mechanic.
What are we missing?
It needs to be like it needs to have like a
5
certain amount of
seconds
juice,
after you
right?
deposit a candle, it goes faster.
Yeah, you need to like be permanently.
You need to be
candles
permanently
over and over.
running candles so that it maintains the movement speed buff.
But the candles, after you pick them up, they immediately go away, right? Like there's not enough candles to actually like permanently be juicing the cart.
I think they respawn force. Yes, I agree with you. There's definitely it moves slow while in combat, but
I mean, look at how slow this thing's. Okay, I just juiced this thing. This thing is still not moving. Like, what are we talking about? Like that thing's not moving faster.
Maybe they removed it. It used to do that.
Oh, maybe they removed it because it's definitely not. It's definitely moving at the exact same speed.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. It's entirely possible.
It does move slightly faster out of combat. That's just true. Like but it's not like enough faster where you're like, wow, this is it. It's like, oh, we're moving 5 pixels faster. I feel like this was exactly what people expected. It's just not very fun.
Is it out of combat, or is it if there's no things near the cart?
I think it's out of combat. Like, I think it's
no players in combat.
I feel like if you would have asked me at the first week of the game when I was doing heroics, I would know, but I don't remember any. I know there was like there was like casts that the mobs would like do on the cart too.
Yeah, but those are stoppable. The casts stop the cart, period.
So we get the cart out of combat here. Let's see what exactly happens. I know we have one shitter mob here, of course. Why wouldn't we? Oh no, we actually ran out of fucking light. I don't know. I think it's
regardless. I think it's just people assumed this was going to be crap, and you're confirming that it still feels like crap.
It still feels like crap. I think the darkness mechanic is just not very good. Like just in general.
Yeah, the second you leave, you go from 100% to 1% damage.
Exactly. I don't think that's very good. There's also the I actually don't hate the bombing run on the last boss, but it's actually kind of funny. If you actually ever wiped the last boss, you have to completely redo this throwing section, which
Yeah.
Really?
you've wiped to
Yeah.
a boss, so you're probably depleting the key anyways. But like, we're really ensuring that you're depleting the key, I guess, with another one.
That makes sense though, because doesn't the last boss's health start based on whatever?
It
the bombing
starts
run-
exactly, yeah.
exactly, yeah. It starts based on like that, but and so maybe there's an issue of like if they respawned them, they couldn't respawn them at 81%. Instead, they would have to respawn them at 100%.
100%.
Yeah. But I think that this boss mechanically it isn't bad. Again, it's just the like I said earlier, the darkness mechanic is just not one that is particularly great. Again, you're feeding this candle permanently, which is okay. Like it feels okay to do, but the problem is like the moment that you run outside the light, you immediately lose all of your damage
And all of your healing.
And if you ever accidentally kill the candle, I think this is the mythic mechanic. If you ever accidentally kill the candle, then you have 5% haste reduction and yeah, so you have 5% haste reduction and you do 5% less damage or something weird, and this is stacking 10-minute debuff. Like yeah, I hovered over it for a second. I didn't see exactly what the numbers on it were, but like it's the fight itself I honestly think is okay. Yeah, so damage taken increased by 10%, haste reduced by 5%. I think the fight itself is okay. I think the darkness mechanic is really bad, and I just literally sat there and whenever I was doing this fight on my Moonkin, I just immediately go, I wish I was on my fucking evoker. Like I literally wish I was on my evoker with Warnstone and Hover, and I was just fucking like porting back and forth, just like able to solo this entire thing.
I mean, I think the running the candle mechanic is just crappy in the first place.
You don't like picking it up?
No, I just think it's bad.
There's a lockout on dropping it, by the way. That's epic.
Dude, it's also on the global, isn't it? Like, I remember having.
I don't know if it's on the global, but it's a 4-second cooldown on being able to drop the candle, and you're just. Like,
no! It was you can't cast while carry the candle, right?
Oh yeah.
That's what it was. That was my issue with it. It's just like this isn't like Shriekwing where you carry the lantern and it's just like something that you protect. This is legitimately like you are stopping damage.
Yeah, I'm pacified, and it's like terrible.
I just think this fight still sucks. Personally, like from watching it, like carrying a candle around is fine to protect it as a mechanic, but the fact that it completely locks you from doing anything else is really silly in my opinion.
Warmth is a mechanic. We need it so bad. Warmth, please. Just after the candle debuff expires, 5 seconds. I just need like 5 seconds of grace period where I'm able to actually continue to DPS the mob, because the problem is whenever you're running here to do this candle effect, your healer's not able to heal you, and your DPS aren't able to do damage. And so of course the reason that I'd love to still be on my Aug Evoker is because Ebon Might is Ebon Might, and so I could just keep extending it while I'm like running this shit. Yeah. Look, we'll have to do this minecart scenario again.
I mean, I don't know. I just sort of wrote this one off. Like when I saw this at the beginning of the expansion, I kind of just like hoped that like
everybody saw this.
Hopefully, the first 2/3 of the dungeon is fun, and then you just suffer.
This
is the dungeon that nobody likes to do, and you just do it, and then I mean, maybe there's a chance that they save this, but I just think that like it's just way too late now at this point. Like I just have sorry to be like such a downer, but I just have so little hope for them. Like I just think that they're just like not really caring about Mythic Plus with this. Like I genuinely think that this is a pretty cool looking dungeon from like a heroic perspective, and just seeing it for the first time, being in the mines and like learning how the minecart works, and I just think they don't really care about Mythic Plus with this sort of thing.
It feels like an M0 dungeon, it feels like a the leveling experience. It feels like maybe like a delve or something like that. It doesn't feel like something that's supposed to be a Mythic Plus dungeon.
Yeah, I just think that I wish because here's the problem is I feel like as a like more competitive player, we get a little bit more flack being like hating on this sort of content. I have no problem with dungeons like this. I just think they don't really have a place in Mythic Plus, Like I just don't understand, like, why not just have this dungeon, have it be a cool dungeon, you do it in the first couple weeks or whatever, and then it's just not an M+, Like just M+ is meant to be like repeatable end game stuff, like I don't know. I don't see any problems with like these wacky dungeons, like make them very small or very short or very weird, but then just leave them on their own. Like,
yeah.
Is it really with all the work that they put into delves? Like, could they really have not made one more dungeon to put in the slot for this season instead of they had to use this?
It's just weird because the rest of this dungeon is fantastic, and 2 mechanics, the minecart and darkness, are just make this dungeon bad.
I mean, the funny thing is, people knew this from the very start, right? Like people knew this from the start. and yet they did like their fixes for this dungeon were not at all what people wanted. Like people knew the darkness mechanics sucked. They gave the feedback when we were doing this dungeon on Heroic Week.
I mean, on Alpha. I remember the first time that when this dungeon came out, and I was in Discord with like Dorky and Evade, and I was watching them do this, and we were just like, "What in the fuck is this dungeon? Like, what are they doing?" When we saw this minecart
well, you just
thing.
sit there, you think about it as a Mythic Plus, and you're just like, "What is this mechanic?"
Like, I think there is some, like, there are ways to make the minecart section more fun.
I agree.
think there are. I think it's like, something like if for every person near the minecart, it goes faster, or even like it base speed increase. For every mob near it, it slows down a little. Not like if a single mob is by it suddenly stops. Like you could do some kind of scaling thing there, which I think is fair. And then like there's like checkpoints where it summons a wave of ads that you need to kill. Like,
yeah, I think that's exactly what I was thinking. Is that it needed to be a more deliberate experience when it came to like higher level dungeons. Like I get what they were going for, oh, you're pushing the minecart and there's swarms of guys and they're everywhere and you can't see them. But in actuality, I think it would have played a lot better if it was just like, okay, find a way to push the cart really fast for 15 seconds. Okay, now here's a big pack. Now you fight it and you're standing still.
Yeah.
And then like, okay, now the cart moves for 15 seconds. Now there's one more big pack. Okay, now you push the cart to the end. Like then you do the boss.
I like that better.
Do we like the lighting mechanic? Like, do we think the lighting mechanic is good?
No, I think
watching you walk around, it's like a moon.
I'm literally running around.
You're not liking this mechanic right now. You Warlock Gate, cat form. Like, I don't know. Whatever.
Okay,
again, I give him a free pass. Like, I don't know what to say.
I will say. Hunters are great in this dungeon. Because flare counts as light.
Huh?
Wait.
So you never need to light the candle because you can just flare on the ground.
You saved this tech for now? Holy.
I knew this since week 1. I just didn't. Nobody needed this knowledge. So, like, as long you still need to keep the candle on for obvious reasons.
Yeah, debuffed.
But you can flare.
Okay,
and that would save a decent amount.
Damn it! That's what the
Augavoker.
That's why
Hunter.
This is it. That's why they did this. It's because they want everyone to use Hunter Flare.
Yeah.
But so I think like my things based on what you said and experiences in the past. Minecart issue, darkness issue, last boss not fun. Yep. All 3 of those things is not fun.
And it's weird because I'm still excited for like the season itself. The issues with that dungeon just turned out to be exactly what everybody was worried about it being.
Which is funny considering season 2 of last expansion, like you had Bracken Hide. I was like, Bracken Hide is gonna be awful. It's gonna be awful. It turned out okay.
Exactly. It turned out okay, and then sometimes they actually cook and they make things better, and then sometimes they just. Okay, what do you guys have to share this week? Anything interesting? I saw we have a new War Chief, Growl.
Jeez, hardcore classic story time. Man, it's been such a good ride, but I think it's almost coming down to an end. If anyone wants to see the closure of the hardcore series, I think February 1st is the date of our Molten Core raid. And Soda has Soda has made it a point, no offense to anybody in the raid, but I'm just going to put it out on the table how it is. Soda has made it a point to just try and get the highest amount of dogshit players in the raid as possible. And by that, well, let's not say that. Let's say people who don't know about raiding and don't know what's going on in raiding. And so like he's making it a point to like try and fit in as many people that don't know anything about Molten Core as possible or like anything about WoW raiding. And so I don't know. The other healers in the guild, like they had a lot more smarter arcs than me. Both 2 of the other healers in the guild died, and then they have like a comeback story going on, and everybody's rooting for them. And like, I don't know. I mean, to be fair, like I don't really care that much. To me, raiding in Classic is like the worst part. The fun part is leveling up and then gearing up and getting ready for the raid, and you do it once, and you're like, wait, this sucks. Like Molten Core sucks. Like, dude, imagine you're doing like whatever raid has the most trash you remember, except for it's double that, and then you can only pull one pack at a time. Like you're just pulling one mob, okay, two mobs, okay, one mob. That's the entire raid. It's not even the bosses. It's literally a 2-hour raid, and the bosses die in 40 seconds. So like, how long are we clearing trash then, if that's the case? Oh yeah, there are bosses. There are sub like 40-second bosses in Molten Core.
The trash descent is harder than the boss.
Oh, in hardcore especially, because you can't just like wipe, right? Like if you die to the trash, your character's deleted. Dude, and so like you actually, yeah. So raiding in hardcore is not fun.
Everything.
It's so fun for the first time, and then it's done. So either way, that'll be a very fun event. I would recommend everybody watch it on the 1st. Plunderstorm on the 25th. I've been gaming for that. I have to stream that tournament, and I want to stream before then, so everyone's been awaiting my stream return, so this is me saying I'll stream at least 2 days this week, one tournament day and one probably before then. Things to share this week, I don't know. Hardcore is kind of dying down. I think everyone's kind of like getting a little burnt. People are, I'm not seeing as many people stream it. Shroud's out here streaming Mario Golf, like.
When are we getting your series on your druid? What happened?
Okay, so okay. So I'll basically go over that. So I recorded everything on Twitch. I made a secret Twitch account for it, and I did it all. At the time, well, no, seriously. Okay. Well, a little bit. So at the time, there was this big contention about like, are we elitist? Like, do we know what we're talking about? Sorry for spoilers. I fucking smoked it. It was the easiest. Sorry to say now I'm distanced enough that I'll say it. It was the easiest shit I've ever done. I literally started on I want to say I started on a 6.0, it was like 607 or 608 druid with 0 gold, and I got all-time 10s in 15 hours. It was like a joke how easy it was to get all-time 10s if you're somebody that plays not off-meta DPS and who knows the dungeons. And it was so boring. And so there's basically one really, really funny dungeon where basically it was a city of threads. It was like a 7 or an 8. We were so far ahead on time. And then we get to the end part and our tank just decides to pull 7 of those like AoE caster guys that blow up on everybody. You know what I'm talking about? That you have to get the kick or whatever.
Oh, the unnaturalers.
Yes. So keep in mind, this is, the tank just randomly decides to pull 7 of those. We full wipe, right? So then we go all the way back. We fly all the way back. Then we pull him again. We kill him again. Then we go to the boss, and the tank runs the tank buster AoE circle into our whole team and blows us up. So now we've wiped twice. Now the timer's like looking a little bit sketch. So then we fly back, or so we thought. So the tank realized that we were short count, and that there was no more count at the end of the dungeon. So the tank just walks forward from the start of the dungeon. I was like, keep in mind, we've cleared all the way and wiped to the last boss. The tank doesn't take the bird and just starts walking forward and fighting spiders. But my entire team doesn't realize this is going on. So it's just me and the tank just trying to clear mobs one at a time while the rest of our DPS is sitting at the end of the dungeon, just wondering what is going on. And I don't remember, we either ended up like barely one-chesting it when I could have 3-chested it, or we depleted it. But it was fucking hilarious. It was the most ridiculous key. So anyway, I recorded all this on Twitch, but what I don't realize is that if you don't have a partnered account or like whatever, your VODs last way shorter.
Yes.
They don't last nearly as long. Yeah. So I thought I had 2 weeks, but I did not. And so I did the first 3 episodes, and then episode 4 was basically that tank guy, and it got deleted. And so I didn't realize it, and then I'm like, oh no, literally the best part of the series. So then I downloaded every single VOD from Twitch. It's gone. And then, I don't know, I just didn't really think it was good. Like, it was just me talking about how good I am and like doing everything and timing every key. Yeah. Like, people don't want to watch that. Like, how many hours of me just like 3-chesting every single key and like nothing going wrong over and over again do people really want to see? Like, I don't know. And then I got caught up with hardcore and some other stuff, and then IRL stuff, and I don't know. So I literally still have the first 2 or 3 episodes like made and edited and everything, and I just like, I don't know, I just didn't think it was good. And like at the time I thought it would be like more interesting and like more, I don't know, I don't want to say I thought I had something to prove, but like, I just wanted to like show people it was possible. But yeah, I don't know.
I think that's fair though.
I'll probably do something with it. Maybe when I
think,
return, I'm sure people will be asking about it.
I do think narratively it can come off the wrong way if it just sounds like you're just like, I don't know, self-glazing the entire time.
And it wasn't really, it wasn't really. Like, basically, the mindset that I went through was like, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time editing it, and also it just wasn't really that entertaining. So, like, for instance, all the nonsense stuff that happened in my Mage series, for example, like, there wasn't really that much of that besides that one key. And then, I don't know, I just like kind of just talked over my thought process and talked about the dungeons, but like at the end of the day, it sort of became a little bit repetitive, right? Whereas like imagine I've done every dungeon once, like okay, now we're doing another City of Threads, and I already just talked about all the things I do in City of Threads, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm just going to talk about City of Threads again and like say all the same things that I just said. I don't know. It didn't come together the same way that I thought it would.
I think it'd be interesting if you did it at the beginning of a season, when people are less likely to know the dungeons, including you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the timing was not great on it as well.
Yeah, because I think the timing was just basically when we were getting a lot of comments that like were out of touch, and so I think you did feel like we all had something to prove there. But...
maybe that series was just for me.
Dude, those people, oh gosh, nothing pisses me off more than people being like, "Hey, you're out of touch." Just like,
Everyone in the comments say Tuttle's out of touch.
It's more just like, it's always used to discredit your argument for anything, and then they're just like, yeah, you're just out of touch. And I'm just like, it's like impossible to argue back. Like, it's like, okay. All right. Move on to Q&A. All right, first question we have Jarlin who asks, one of the things I noticed after playing Classic is how much more like an MMO it feels. Retail feels like a lobby game by comparison. How can they bring that sense of community into retail? Is it even possible?
Oh god, I just went on a monologue and now this one's me too.
This one is me too.
We can start if you want.
You guys can start. I'll let you guys say what you think.
This one's not me. I don't know anything about the Classic community, frankly.
I mean, I'll say my thoughts on it is you can't.
Why? Why do you think you can't?
I think the time has passed, and I think that the way that people have decided is the right way to play the game is not how this is anymore. You do not play... I mean, like... I think a lot of the quality of life features... Like, the long answer now. A lot of the quality of life features go directly against community. I mean, I think that's the longer answer. Things like LFG, things like queuing... even like, Group Finder, LFR, they also remove a sense of that collaboration and communication that I think comes with that. In addition, these days, with external things like Discord, no, I'm just going to mainly say Discord, people are not communicating in-game with those people. Like, if you're going to form a raid or you're going to form a group, you're not going to be like, posting in game as much. You are going to be doing things outside. Like, more people are doing things outside of game than in game.
Yeah,
the internet has changed from back in the day. You look at like Classic without LFG, like, sure, a lot of people advertise in trade chat, right? Like, that was the typical, but even then, I still think a lot of people through outside sources just use that because Discord's on your phone, Discord's on your computer. Like, voice chat is a thing now. So yeah, that's kind of my rant on that.
Would you say it's safe to say that Classic's more about the journey and like retail's more about the end game content?
Partially, I think. So Tettles did his video essay arc recently. I actually almost embarked on one of those when I played Classic the first time talking about this subject. And what I sort of came down to is that when you're putting things in the game, in Classic, they designed a lot of things to be social experiences versus retail, where they've slowly moved in a direction just to make things better gameplay experiences. So like when Squishy talks about LFG, a lot of people might not understand, but like, okay, let's say I'm joining a group for Shadowfang Keep and I'm looking to get some loot. Like, okay, Shadowfang Keep, you have to walk to the dungeon. There's no summoning stones, there's no anything, right? And so it already builds this social experience of like, okay, there's this guy who's literally waiting outside of the dungeon right away.
Mhm.
There's this jackass that's halfway across the world, and he was literally like in the party the whole time and made no effort to go through. There's the guy who's like, oh, I need this loot or whatever, and it's already creating this social experience that you get to have, right? That has that sense of community. Is it good gameplay? No, it's total dog shit. I played a dungeon the other day where I had to wait 45 minutes outside of the dungeon for my team to get there because people, like literally the guy who made the group was on the other side of the earth, waited till all 5 people joined and got to the dungeon before he even started going there. And I hate that guy, but like that's a social experience where we can laugh and talk about, right? It's not good gameplay. And so I think there's so many things in Classic that they are creating things to be a good social experience and not necessarily good gameplay. And that's where, when they talk about, oh, you think you do, but you don't, they sort of lost the idea that, well, some people just like the social stuff, right? Some people just want to have a good social experience and don't really care about the gameplay. Another thing about the social versus gameplay is rotations in Classic WoW are a complete joke. It's a lot small, like you have very few buttons, your rotation's way simpler, but a lot of buttons feel like really visceral. Like in Classic WoW, when you press Frost Nova and it freezes every single mob and everyone can kind of like reposition and do whatever, like you really feel it. Every time your mage presses Frost Nova, you feel it. Every time. But in retail, like you're just like bam, 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 this move, that move, and it's like any one individual button you press, you don't really feel it, or it's like very, very rare, and that also creates a social experience. And there's like it drizzles into retail a little bit, right? Like for example, let's say you're a Moonkin and there's a range mob that jumps out, but you were ready for it and you immediately typhoon it back in, right? Like that's a cool fucking feeling, right?
Yeah.
Not only that you did that, but your teammates just saw you did that. They're like, oh shit, and there's way more of that in Classic because the gameplay is so much slower and the buttons are like so much more impactful. Like you can just crit a mob for half of its health in Classic, because you just have one ability that does that. And I think that unfortunately, but retail just has way better gameplay. Someone like Dorky is like looking at Classic and he's like, hey, this might be fun. I want to try this. Gets to level 20 and just like, this gameplay is dog shit. Like, I'm just not having fun. Like I want to be here. Like all these things look fun to me. I think I should play this, but it just isn't fun. And it's like, you sort of have that trade-off of social versus gameplay. And I think that unfortunately, the more you try and combine them, the more you get messes like Shadowlands, where it's like you're just pissing off both players, right? Like very few people had fun in that regard of Shadowlands, of like, it just kind of like clashed two different. Now it's so far gone of like, retail is so gameplay focused and Classic is so social focused, and you can't really combine the two. But I will say though, is I love Classic, and I think that expanding in that, I think SOD and Classic Plus or whatever kind of missed the mark, but I do wish they did develop more games with that sort of social aspect in mind. It just is funny that Classic Hardcore is essentially the only way they've been able to truly recreate that experience, and the only way is basically just to punish people so heavily that you delete your character if you're not careful. It's the only way they can slow people down, and at the end of the day, you still have people like Jinji who've died 9 times trying to AoE farm an entire dungeon by themselves, right? Like you'll literally delete his character and you still can't slow that guy down. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just WoW players. And
our goat. That's our goat, our retail hero.
We love Jinji.
I think for like a couple more things, you mentioned it a little bit, is like community comes from overcoming challenges, but the number of challenges has been reduced or removed just because those challenges just weren't fun for some players, like on retail.
Like what you talk about, like leveling?
Like Growl said, summoning. Like even like. You know,
I've never thought of summoning as a challenge. I guess that's a good point.
It is. You know how long it takes for some people to get to a fucking dungeon, Tettles?
Oh yeah, well, there's a lot too, like enchantments, for example, right? Like enchantments, the way they used to work is you had to find a freaking enchanter. You'd have to go to an enchanter and stick your stupid wrists in the thing and make him press a button and then tip him or whatever. And he had to have the materials. Like now there's just scrolls, right? You just load up your whatever long boy that you paid $90 for, and you buy every enchant off of the Wowhead list, and then you slap him on your gear.
Pause. Did you buy the long boy?
I did not.
Oh yes.
Anyway,
honestly,
sorry.
it's not really. That wasn't really a statement. It was more just like I don't know. It just felt so hard to justify spending 100. What's worse is someone even messaged me about it after that podcast, and they're like, you know, being a sick, awesome viewer and like trying to chip in or whatever about, like, you know what I mean? No, you know, I'm
not buying this thing. I'm not buying this motherfucking now.
No, but I totally get that. Like, yeah, it's just even the small things like raid, you know, old school raid buffs, right? Like when Oni's head was going, or Warchief's blessing was going up in Classic, like the entire community was there because you wanted the buff. It was that powerful. But
oh
also,
my God, world buffs.
That buff was a pain in the fucking ass because if you died, it's just gone.
Oh yeah, world buffs are a crazy one because basically, if people aren't familiar with how that works, basically before you raid, you can turn in an item that essentially buffs your whole raid, but it doesn't just buff your whole raid, it buffs everybody in the town at that time. And so what it'll be is it'll be like, imagine the one big guild is raiding, right? Imagine it's time for Liquid's raid. All the Liquid people show up in town on their mounts, and then they turn in the thing and it buffs everybody, and all the stupid like level 3 people get their buffs and they run out and kill boars with it. Like, it's just a social event, right? But realistically, it's so fucking stupid, right? Like, the way that the world buffs work, where you'd have to like do all this stuff and you have to chrono boon them, and you have to fly to this town and then fly to that town, and it was miserable. It basically made me quit. Like, I can't stand, like, as soon as we cleared Nax, I just quit immediately in the last hardcore, and I doubt I'm gonna get that far this time, because like, I can't stand that. Like, it's so much downtime, and like, it's cool, like, it's so freaking cool when you're level 17 in the world and you just hear the like DBM sound, like the do, and you're like, what is that? And there's like a world buff on you, and your attack speed is huge, and you're like,
and
you know,
those mattered. They were powerful.
Oh, they're huge. Oh, yeah. And then you're asking in guild chat, like, what was that? And then some guy explains it to you, and you're like, oh, man, there's some guild somewhere that's out there raiding right now, and I get the buff because of them. Like, again, it's like dog shit gameplay, but like very fun and very social.
It's crazy that you guys aren't like going out and farming raid buffs today. Like, I mean, I've been going out into the Dream Surge and mind controlling some Stag and Legion and getting them all of my raid these buffs. I've even going to story mode raids to get all these raid buffs. What are you guys doing?
Stay bad, Tuttles. Stay bad.
Dungeons.
Stay bad. Stay bad.
Yeah, I'm pissed, man. I'm sorry I'm pissed about it. Like, it's so fucking stupid. Anyways. All right. That's going to do it. That's going to conclude episode 26 of The Bench. We will be back next week. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. It's gonna be probably something. We're gonna probably review Growl's Plunderstorm win. We're gonna celebrate.
Yeah, it's right. We never know what we're gonna talk about.
We just YOLO it. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Peace.
Bye bye.